Chapter 65. The Dark Sky, the Dense Forest, and the Hidden Danger. Another 2 hours had passed, and the dense forest still looked as quiet as before. But when you actually walked in, you would realize that it was not the case. The number of excited flying ants grew, and Scylla no longer needed to search for their nest. They would naturally transmit this excitement and cause even more flying ants to become active. Tiger Thorn sat next to Teresa and stared at the biomonitor in his hand without saying a word. Brown Thorn grew a little restless and moved closer to look at the light dots on the biomonitor. There were a total of 13 people who came to Seven Lights for this operation. Including Brown Thorn and Tiger Thorn, all 13 light dots were originally on the biomonitor, but now 7 had already been extinguished. While Brown Thorn was looking at the biomonitor, another light dot had been extinguished. It looks like there are some crucial things that we really don't know. Tiger Thorn stared at the biomonitor and said, "How can a young master of the Duance family possess such skills?" Tiger Thorn pressed the sonic gun against Teresa's head. As long as I pull the trigger, those complicated nerves in your head will be thrown into chaos, and you yourself will die a very tragic death. Teresa raised her head and stared straight at Tiger Thorn. I'm only responsible for contacting and conveying Aflon's intentions. I don't know anything else. I don't know anything about Duance Scylla's past at all. Tiger Thorn knew that Teresa was speaking the truth, but this sense of unknown about their target made Tiger Thorn very uncomfortable. In the past, they would always analyze their target before carrying out a mission to ensure that nothing would go wrong. But ever since they accepted the mission to assassinate Duance Scylla, everything had changed. The losses caused by all kinds of variables, the pressure from all sides, and those with ulterior motives eyeing them from the back had finally created Black Thorn's current situation. It was fake. False. All the information they had received about Scylla Duance back then was false. Aflon had begun his preparations more than 10 years ago, and all the information provided to them by their investors was false. Right now, they even felt that they had never understood this young master of the Duance family at all. The Black Thorn was about to disappear into the dust of history. Even if it wanted to rise again, it wouldn't be possible in a short period of time. Those people from the Duance family provided them with enough money and a sufficiently safe and hidden identity to avoid being hunted down by all parties. And the condition was that they had to kill Duance Scylla. While Tiger Thorn was deep in thought, 2 more light dots on the vital indicator went off. Brown Thorn could not help but look at Snake Thorn. I'll contact Golden Thorn. Gold Thorn was the one who stopped Brown Thorn and entered the forest with Snake Thorn. Generally speaking, unless it was an extremely urgent matter, the commander would not easily contact the operatives because the electromagnetic waves of the receiver could expose them, unless the operatives felt safe and took the initiative to contact the commander. But now, looking at the constantly extinguishing light spots, Brown Thorn could no longer sit still. Tiger Thorn did not say anything, which meant that he was giving his tacit approval. Brown Thorn took out his communicator. This was a communicator specially prepared for their internal personnel, and its signal coverage was set to only cover this area. It would not be received through satellites, nor would it use any other signal reception equipment in Seven Lights. However, there was no response from Gold Thorn's communicator. Contact Snake Thorn. Right now, Tiger Thorn had an especially bad feeling. Perhaps the other party's movements were much faster than they had imagined. His vital indicator had not disappeared, but why? Unlike Golden Thorn, Snake Thorn's communicator was connected very quickly. What on earth happened? Brown Thorn asked urgently. Be careful. Snake Thorn only managed to utter 2 words before he went silent. Tiger Thorn glanced at the life indicator on his hand. The dot representing Snake Thorn was still lit up, proving that Snake Thorn was still alive. However, he could not make a single sound. Just what in the world had happened? Snake Thorn? Snake Thorn! Brown Thorn shouted twice more, but there was still no response from Snake Thorn. However, there was a blurry splashing sound that sounded like flowing liquid coming from the communicator. Snake Thorn really wanted to tell Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn to be careful of the flying ants. His assassination skills might not be as good as Golden Thorn's, But his analysis of clues was better than golden thorn and eagle thorns. When he arrived here, he had already noticed that something was wrong with the flying ants in the forest, but it was still too late in the end. The 3 needles on the back of his neck prevented Snake Thorn from making any sound at all. It was as if his reflexes had been cut off, rendering him immobile. The needles gradually merged into Snake Thorn's body. Snake Thorn felt all the blood in his body flowing in reverse. Blood was flowing out his nostrils and mouth. The flying ants smelled the excitement factor in his blood and swarmed towards Snake Thorn's body. Snake Thorn's face, twisted from pain, was covered by the flying ants and could no longer be seen clearly. On Brown Thorn's side, there was an eerie silence. Even Teresa, who was lying there, felt a chill run down her spine. A gust of wind blew past, accompanied by the rustling of leaves. It was abnormally cold. After a moment of silence, clear and unhurried footsteps came from the communicator. Tiger Thorn snatched the communicator from Brown Thorn's hand and said in a deep voice, "Duant Sillen, I know you're there, beep." Before Tiger Thorn could finish his sentence, the communicator lost its connection. Although she couldn't see the face of the person on the other side of the communicator, Teresa felt that the current Sillen was so calm that it was almost cold. Before this, Teresa was still confident that she held a certain amount of weight in Sillen's heart. But from the looks of it now, Teresa suspected that if Tiger Thorn had placed her in front of him as a hostage, would Sillen have opened fire without hesitation as well? Passive, too passive. Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn felt at the same time that perhaps Duant Sillen hadn't come here for Teresa at all. Perhaps Duant Sillen's goal was the same as theirs, and that was to eliminate the other party. Perhaps. Of the 13 people, only the 2 of them were left now. Tiger Thorn grabbed Teresa's long hair and pulled her over. Brown Thorn understood and stood up to stand back to back with Tiger Thorn, vigilantly observing their surroundings. Keeping Teresa alive was their final shield. From the information given by that person from the Duant's family, Tiger Thorn knew that Aflon valued Teresa very much. No matter what, Duant Sillen would still take her into consideration, at least a little. Right now, they had already noticed that the disadvantages of facing them in this forest were greater than the advantages. The dozen or so people before them had already been eliminated, so the chances of their covert assassination wouldn't be too high either. From the looks of it, they might as well come out in the open. An hour later, under Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn's vigilance, the sound of footsteps gradually came from the distance. Brown Thorn didn't dare to act rashly. This person gave him too strange a feeling, and he didn't know if these clear footsteps were a trap of some sort. After all, no one would expose themselves so openly in a situation where they could be killed by the other party. Chapter 66. Tiger Thorn pressed his gun against Teresa's head and looked at the person who was slowly walking over. Brown Thorn's entire body was tense, and he was in a state of high alert. Duant Sillen, you truly are a character. You forced us, Black Thorn, to this extent. Even death is a consolation. Sillen did not react to Tiger Thorn's words. His footsteps were still the same as before. Tiger Thorn's gun was pressed against Teresa's head, hinting that if Sillen walked any further, he would blow up this beautiful girl's head. Although it was nighttime, Tiger Thorn could see the expression on Sillen's face. This young kid looked too indifferent and calm, making it impossible to see through him. Sillen stood still 50 meters away from Tiger Thorn and the others. He looked at Teresa, then at Brown Thorn and Tiger Thorn. You want to kill her? Maybe it was because Sillen's tone was too calm, but Teresa was a little afraid. Right now, she really could not see through Sillen and could not guess what Sillen would do next. Or maybe it was because she did not dare to guess further. Seeing that Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn were silent, Sillen seemed to have just thought of something. Oh, you want to use her to threaten me. Sillen's tone made Tiger Thorn very uncomfortable. It was as if he had been slapped in the face. Your father, Aflon, values her very much, but you'll still kill her. If you can't do it, why don't I help you? Sillen had just finished speaking when 3 needles flew straight out and shot towards Teresa, who was standing in front of Tiger Thorn. Sillen got up and retreated hastily at the same time the needles were shot. A bullet hole appeared almost as soon as he jumped away from his original spot. When Scylla threw out the needles, Brown Thorn, who had been watching him vigilantly all this time, opened fire without hesitation. However, Scylla's movements were very fast. Scylla practically brushed past two of the bullets and retreated into the forest with a few flashes. Brown Thorn did not give chase. If he followed Scylla inside, his fate would definitely be no different from Snake Thorn and the others. After returning to Tiger Thorn's side, Brown Thorn looked at Teresa, who was no longer breathing after being flung to the ground by Tiger Thorn. There were still traces of blood at the corner of her mouth. Seemingly in disbelief, Brown Thorn checked Teresa's pulse and heartbeat before he said with a frown, "That kid is really ruthless. He is not a person who can be threatened." Tiger Thorn stared at the spot where Scylla had hidden himself in the forest and said in a low voice, "I don't think he looks like a rich young master. He looks more like a certain type of person. Killers like us? No, it's a hunter. No matter what kind of person he is, he must die." Previously, they wanted to use Teresa to lure Scylla over, but they didn't expect Scylla to kill Teresa the moment he saw her. There were only the three of them left in the forest. A chase was taking place in the forest. Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn were afraid that Scylla would lead them into a trap, so they would observe carefully every time they gave chase. They would only continue after confirming that there was no danger. However, Scylla was too slippery. Every time they raised their guns, Scylla would dodge as if he could sense it. Suddenly, Tiger Thorn's alarm bells rang out. He abruptly exerted force with his foot on the ground, leaving a deep footprint where he stood as he dodged the incoming attacks. Just like Tiger Thorn, Brown Thorn also dodged and dodged. Needles were not the only things shooting at them. There were also bullets. What surprised Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn was that the speed of these needles was actually about the same as bullets. At the same time, Tiger Thorn also noticed something else. These needles were different from the ones used to kill Teresa. Tiger Thorn's night vision was very good. He could clearly see the needles shattering when they pierced into trees or collided with rocks. Then, they would melt and evaporate. Poison. Tiger Thorn held his breath and swiftly applied a layer of anti-poison film on his breathing mask. After seeing Tiger Thorn's signal, Brown Thorn also prepared to apply a layer of anti-poison film on his breathing mask. After all, it was not a specialized anti-poison mask. Although this kind of anti-poison film could protect against poison, it would affect one's breathing to a certain extent. A normal person might not be able to adapt to it, but Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn could endure it for a very long time. However, they usually wouldn't use anti-poison films. However, just as Brown Thorn took out the anti-poison film and was about to apply it, a bullet shot into his temple. Brown Thorn was hiding behind a rock. The rock could block the enemy's shots, and he had blocked several shots just now. Almost 10 needles had collided with the rock, but he never imagined that he would be killed in one shot under such circumstances. A curved shot. Seeing all of this, Tiger Thorn immediately understood that the kid's previous shots were all intentional. His previous shots were all straight, but this shot was curved. Normally, this kind of person only existed in military academies. Why would such a person appear in Seven Lights? Tiger Thorn didn't have the time to think about these things. He was alone now, and he needed to focus all of his energy on guarding against that kid. Perhaps even Tiger Thorn himself did not know that the number one priority in his subconscious mind was no longer to kill Scylla, but to guard against him. Strangely, Scylla didn't move at all, and he quieted down after firing a shot. Then, Tiger Thorn saw a shocking scene. A large swarm of flying ants flew towards him and landed on the already dead Brown Thorn's body. They especially landed on the bleeding areas, forming a black mass. This was indeed a psychological blow to Tiger Thorn, and it was also at this moment that a dozen or so needles shot towards him. Tiger Thorn dodged to the side, but in the next moment, a figure swiftly arrived. Tiger Thorn's speed wasn't slow either. He raised his gun. Crack! The gun barrel was twisted like a fried dough twist, and at the same time, a needle pierced into Tiger Thorn's heart. Before he died, Tiger Thorn suddenly thought of something. From a moment he met Scylla until now, Even when Scylla fired at them, he didn't have the slightest murderous intent. Moreover, Scylla wasn't wearing a camouflage suit, and yet the infrared detection didn't detect anything out of the ordinary. Scylla Dewance. This man was like a cold-blooded animal. Not only did he possess the coldness of a killer, he also possessed the blood of a cold-blooded animal. This was Tiger Thorn's evaluation of Scylla before he died. But if Mo Hung knew that someone had such an evaluation of Scylla, he would probably grab his weapon and throw it at him. His disciple wasn't a cold-blooded animal. Not cold at all. It was only after he looked at the biomonitor in Tiger Thorn's hands and finished off the last one and extinguished all the dots on the biomonitor that Scylla finally let out a sigh of relief. The half-life of the drug that excited the flying ants was 12 hours, and it would break down once the time was up. Therefore, didn't have to worry too much, and no one would discover this drug, even if they came to the woods in the future. Scylla rejoiced that the true core members of Blackthorn had all been eliminated. If the ones here today were the true core assassins of Blackthorn, he wouldn't have been so lucky. Indeed, the strength of an organization that could occupy a certain position on the assassin leaderboard was absolutely not to be underestimated. Scylla had felt it when he was dealing with Tiger Thorn and the others today. If it wasn't for Scylla's trickery of using those flying ants, it would have been very difficult for him to achieve a good result today. Even if these people who weren't core members had this kind of strength, how strong would the core members be? How strong were the people who had killed the core members of Blackthorn? It wasn't just one person or a few people who had eliminated the core members of Blackthorn. It could have been another organization, a family's hidden hand, or an army. Scylla would also encounter these forces when he returned to the 6th team in the future. He loosened his shoulders. His arms were sore from swinging bullets and needles today. After cleaning up the various traces of battle, Scylla walked over to Teresa's side. If he didn't go over now, she would probably really be dead. Chapter 67. Speaking of which, when Knight woke up from holding back his pee in the morning, he immediately felt that his stomach was empty. He went to the storage cabinet in the kitchen and took a look. There was nothing else there other than a few lonely pieces of bread. Knight scratched his head. He remembered that Scylla said he was going out for a stroll last night to buy some food. Why was it still empty? Scylla. Knight roared at the top of his lungs. No response. He ran to Scylla's bedroom and study. No one there. He dialed his communicator. No one answered. Left with no choice, Knight used GPS to track Scylla's communicator. However, the signal showed that he was in Scylla's bedroom. Scylla's communicator was placed inside the bedside table. Knight looked at the time. There were still 3 hours until their next match. On the other side, Teresa saw a dark gold color when she opened her eyes. There was even a string of flashing numbers on it. Beside the numbers was a knife-shaped symbol. The receipt of the Vanguard Hunter Group. The receipt was given to Scylla by Schotten when he left the 6th team. The thought that Schotten had instilled into Scylla was this: we're hunters. We can't work, sweat, and sweat without any money, can we? Moreover, people like Aflon wouldn't care about some small money. Therefore, he couldn't hide the receipt when he could, and couldn't retract his knife when he could. A hunter should treat themselves a little better, and be a little more ruthless to their investors. This time, he had helped Aflon solve a huge problem, and even saved Teresa's life. He had to ask for a bit more reward no matter what. Scylla didn't hold back at all. He directly wrote an 8-digit number on the receipt. No one would be able to detect a fake death unless they used a sophisticated life detector. The reason Scylla shot the needle at Teresa was to fake her death. Only then would he be able to save Teresa, and most importantly, he wouldn't be tied down by his own hands and feet. Moreover, if Teresa died, Aflon definitely wouldn't pay much. When Teresa woke up, she didn't say anything about the number on the bill. She just looked at Scylla with a complicated expression. Truth be told, when Scylla walked out with a calm and indifferent expression as if he didn't care about anything, Teresa didn't expect Scylla to care about her life at all. Sometimes, a hunter was very similar to an assassin. They were ruthless, cold, and merciless. Moreover, when Scylla said to Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn, "Why don't I help you?" Teresa felt her entire body turn ice cold. The moment she lost consciousness after being stabbed by the needles Scylla flung at her, Teresa felt despair. Teresa realized that she had been underestimating this person who was even younger than her. The look in Silen's eyes made Teresa feel as if Silen knew everything, but she wasn't sure. After all, there were only 5 people who knew the secret, and those 5 people would never reveal it unless it was the right time. How much do you know? This is all I know. Silen pointed at the dazzling bill in front of Teresa. Remember to transfer it to your account in time. Of course, if you want to thank me more, I won't refuse. Putting away the bill, Teresa tried to stand up, but she was still a little dizzy. She could only sit back down. What on earth happened? Teresa asked. Silen did not answer the question directly and said, You still need some time to recover. I believe you can contact someone to take you back. If that's the case, I won't stay any longer. Wait a minute, Teresa called out to Silen, who was about to turn around and leave. Those people are all dead? Silen nodded. Teresa took a deep breath and calmed her emotions. Since those people are all dead, Mr. Aflonside will speed up his actions. Therefore, you need to be prepared in advance. He knew what Teresa meant when she said to be prepared in advance, so he made an understood gesture before disappearing into the forest in a flash. When Silen returned to the dormitory, Knight was talking to C.I., Jin Cheng, and Lung on the communicator to discuss countermeasures. Silen, did you go for a stroll to another planet? Knight rushed up and grabbed Silen by the collar and roared. However, his expression softened a little when he saw the bag in Silen's hands. Silen had gone to the supermarket to buy food on his way back. It looked like this was the right decision. Silen, if you still don't come back, I'm going to send people to search for you. We need to discuss our strategy and bet an hour before the match. Lung urged from the other side of the communicator. That being said, Silen knew that Lung, C.I. Jincheng, and Knight were truly concerned about him. Smiling, Silen said, Bet on one-hit kill for the next match. Lung's eyes lit up when he heard this. Their opponents this time were the last tournament's champions, the Visby brothers. The odds must be shocking. Knight rubbed his chin. It's going to be very difficult. All right, look at that grin on your face. On the communicator's display panel, C.I. Jincheng's face was full of disdain. Oh, right. Silen, do you want to become the champion of the double combat tournament? Knight looked at Silen. I don't want to, but if you want to take it, you can take it. Haha, good, you're a brother. I'm relieved to hear that. The reason I'm participating in the double combat tournament is to avenge a friend and teach the Visby brothers a lesson. I don't want to fight anymore after I beat the Visby brothers. His father had already given him a hard time when he participated in this tournament. If he continued to fight, Knight might get beaten up by his father when he got back. In his father's words, the Thunderstorm Fist was not meant to be played around. It lived on the battlefield, not these childish games that were purely for the sake of attracting students. The students who were treated as secret weapons of the military academies would not participate in these tournaments. That was because they were busy with missions and could already be considered as warriors. They had no interest in the little games between students, and even if they participated, they would not use their full strength. Exposing their true strength to the public was even more disadvantageous to them. All right, this was for the best. Silen still had to prepare for the aftermath, and ending it earlier would save him some time. Sigh, I wonder how much resentment those who went after Shadow X will feel. Lung sighed sadly on the other side. Lung, remember to bet again. Maybe you'll break a new record. C.I. Jincheng said. Since he returned earlier than expected, Silen deleted the messages and traces in his answering machine and took a short nap. Then, he logged onto the Sector Championships platform with Knight. Knight and the other two did not ask what Silen had been up to during the night. Even if Silen did not say, they had already guessed some of it. Just as C.I. Jincheng had said, the match against the Visby brothers after that had broken the record of the top 16. This match was very short, even shorter than the previous match against Liu Yewu and One Smile Kill. Instant kill. The moment the system displayed the start of the match, Silen and Knight immediately moved. Their movements were so fast that the Visby brothers could only block them without being able to dodge in time. The violent lightning created by Knight's fists had already rendered one of them unable to fight. The other person facing Silen did not feel good either. It was as if he had crashed into a mechanical armor. instantly losing his ability to fight as well. At the same time the system displayed Knight and Shadow X duo wins, it also displayed the eye-catching cursor of this match's record-breaking. After a moment of silence, the students in front of their microcomputers were completely fired up. Instant kill. It was actually an instant kill. But not long after their excitement, a piece of news pressed down on them like an iceberg. Knight and Shadow X had withdrawn from the double combat tournament. A lot of people came here for Shadow X, and without Shadow X, they lost half of their interest. Half an hour later, Kamas, Feng Haichao, Boer, Faradin, Ryan, Bon and other teams had withdrawn from the double combat tournament. This way, there really was nothing to see in the double combat tournament. Their boiling blood had been frozen, and the students were filled with resentment. The entire sector championship forum's layout was filled with thick resentment. Serene and the others didn't pay attention to the students' reactions. After Celine and Knight had announced their withdrawal, Knight received a message from Kamas in his mailbox on the sector championship platform. As for Celine's mailbox, there were a lot of messages, but Celine basically did not bother to look at them. Celine, Kamas, and the others want to fight us in the final integrated warfare tournament. Knight was much more interested in integrated warfare, because integrated warfare was actual combat. Only the academies that entered the top 10 of the rankings could participate in the following practical combat tournament. However, with Seven Lights Foundation, entering the top 10 was not a problem at all. Sure, I look forward to it. Celine did not refuse. The integrated warfare tournament was also a great opportunity for him. Chapter 68. Another week had passed since the end of the small competitions. The large team competition, mech combat, gunfight, armored combat, and so on had also ended one after another. According to the ranking points of each competition, the top 10 universities could participate in the integrated warfare contest. Seven Lights was still 5th place this time, and the higher-ups of Seven Lights were very satisfied with this ranking. It was not easy to conquer a country, and even harder to defend it. However, the final ranking had not been decided yet. The integrated warfare contest points accounted for 30% of the total points, and many schools had staged a spectacular comeback in the final integrated warfare contest. The electronic magazine Gathering of Winds and Clouds had reported some of the highlights of the contest in a special section. Unlike previous years, the topic that took up the most space this year was not the champion and runner-up of the large competitions or duels, but a guy who looked like a generic robot, Shadow X. Shadow X had set off a hurricane of attention on the sector championship platform on the first day of his appearance. Then, all kinds of unusual events happened one after another, and it was exactly because of his appearance that he attracted some of the military academy's seed students who had never appeared before. These students participated with Shadow X's participation and left with Shadow X's withdrawal. All of the focus was on Shadow X. There was an authoritative critic who commented on Gathering of Winds and Clouds that Shadow X was a supernova that was in no way inferior to the military academy's top students. Some people said that the critic was exaggerating a little. No matter how excellent an academy at Sector B was, there was no way they could surpass the top students at Sector C. Right? Some people agreed with the critic's words, but even more people maintained a wait-and-see attitude. The integrated warfare contest was the competition that tested a student's ability the most. Whether they were gold or scrap metal would be known in a single match. Most importantly, Shadow X's true identity would be exposed in the integrated warfare contest. The people of every university counted down the days and looked forward to it every day. Each university would send 10 people to participate in the integrated warfare contest, and each university would choose 10 people based on their students' abilities. The person in charge of the selection was the head of the training division, but Neil had gone to Sector C to report on the last biochemical base operation. Therefore, the selection this time was taken over by Gerard. Gerard would choose suitable people and report them to the higher-ups of Seven Lights. At the same time, it would be announced on the Seven Lights forum so that the students of Seven Lights would know. If there were no major problems, the higher-ups of Seven Lights would finalize the final list. The students who wanted to participate in the integrated warfare contest would submit their ID and battle records on the sector championship platform to Gerard for review. Normally speaking, the higher the battle record, the higher the chances of being selected. Everyone was eager to participate in the integrated battle. Anyone who thought they had some ability would report their information. When they graduated, if their graduation information included their experience in the sector comprehensive championship, then they would be in a much better position after they left campus. They could straighten their backs and shout boldly, "Look, we've participated in the sector championship." Gerard was lying lazily in his office, looking at the list of names and battle records on the screen in front of him. There were nearly 1,000 people who had signed up for the competition, and some of them kicked Gerard out the moment they saw him. With Gerard's many years of experience, he knew which of them were strong on the outside, but weak on the inside, and which of them had real skills and strong qualities, just by looking at the battle videos. There were only 10 people participating in the integrated warfare, but 3 of them had already been decided internally. This was decided long ago by the school's higher-ups. But seeing that the 3 people who had been decided internally were really capable, Gerard had no objections. The 3 that had been decided internally were Fu Luo, Kong Man, and C.I. Jincheng. Fu Luo, vice headmaster and Ting's precious granddaughter, a top student in the medical school. Medical personnel were a necessity in the integrated warfare, so Gerard had no objections at all towards Fu Luo. Kong Man, a specially recruited student, an information technology developer in the scientific research department. At a young age, he had already published his results in a journal with a high degree of contribution. He had a very good understanding of positioning, teleportation, and secret code decryption. He belonged to the category of technical personnel, which was also necessary. As for C.I. Jincheng, even if he didn't know what illustrious achievement C.I. Jincheng had, Gerard would have to think twice before objecting. People might only know some superficial things about the C.I. family, but Gerard had heard some things about the C.I. family. However, those things were classified as secrets, and no one dared to say it out loud. Gerard held his chin and moved his finger over the button, flipping through the student's information page by page. Suddenly, Gerard's hand paused. He straightened his body and moved closer to the screen. This bastard! Gerard couldn't help but curse with a smile. There were 2 pictures on the screen. One was Silen's picture, and the other was Shadow X in the form of a generic robot. Below the pictures were the relevant battle records. Gerard didn't need to look at the battle records to drag Silen into the list straight away. After the last biochemical base mission, everyone in the training division and the police division were full of praise for this little guy who wasn't even 20 years old yet. Be it personal strength or technical application, Silen's performance had far surpassed the average student. Next on Silen's list was Knight. Gerard didn't need to look at the others because he dragged Knight's face straight into the list the moment he saw it. This was a good seedling that should have gone to a military academy in the first place. The descendant of a general, his strength was unquestionable, and there was nothing to nitpick about. Moreover, even if Gerard didn't choose him, as long as Knight expressed his desire to participate in the integrated warfare contest, the higher-ups of Seven Lights would still add him into the list. After flipping through a few more people, Gerard chose Pride, Surd, and Hard. Now there were 8 of them. There were still 2 left. Gerard rubbed his sore eyes and was about to drip 2 drops of eye drops when his communicator rang. Gerard looked at the name displayed on the interface and curled his lips. Fine, it's most likely another backdoor opening through connections. Gerard's guess was correct. The call was from the Lord Headmaster of Seven Lights himself. Someone had sought out the headmaster and asked him to negotiate with Gerard. This person was none other than young Master Lung of the So Poor That Only Has Money family. Originally, young Master Lung really didn't plan to participate in this integrated warfare contest. He had no money to participate in this thing. He didn't care about honor or whatever. However, he felt awkward when the other 3 people in the dormitory were participating, so he ran to Seven Lights' headmaster's doorstep in a slipper and waited for him. Gerard didn't know much about the Andryra family. The public's impression of them was that they were a So Poor That Only Has Money family. But in reality, it was more than that. Even if he didn't know much about the Andryra family, Gerard still knew some bits of information. The Andryra family was familiar with many of the bigwigs in the military, and many of the military's weapons were provided by the Andryra family. The Andryra family paid a lot for the military's expenses. Gerard couldn't object because of this. The headmaster would be the one to step in anyway. The old headmaster would take responsibility if anything happened. As for the last person, Gerard chose the 5th place of this single combat tournament. His name was Copley. As for why he was only 5th place, there was no need to explain. The military academy was right in front of him. The reason he chose this person wasn't just because of his results in the single combat tournament. It was more because of this person. Copley wasn't a normal human. He was a Hassenfess. A normal human's static plane of view was only 100 or so degrees, but a Hassenfess could see more than 270 degrees. Their eyes were more inclined to the sides compared to normal humans, which was why they had this advantage. Their wide field of view and sensitive vision made them better at investigation. This is it. 10 people. 3 were predetermined, and 1 was a backdoor candidate. Gerard chose 6 himself. This was the first list. After that, Gerard chose a few more candidates. After he was done, he submitted the list. Sigh. I wonder how the people in Seven Lights will react when they see Silen's ID. Chapter 69. Due to the integrated warfare contest, C.I. Jinsheng returned to Planet Seven Lights early. Inside the accommodation, Silen, Knight, and C.I. Jinsheng sat in the living room and watched the past integrated warfare contests. There were 2 locations for the integrated warfare. First, they had to gather on an asteroid, Planet C, End 976, which was overseen by the GL Army at the border between Sector B and Sector C. The teams from the 10 universities would undergo identity checks, be given tools, and so on. Then, they would depart for their destination at the same time, another military-supervised asteroid C, N300. While the trio were watching the video, the door to the accommodation opened, and Lung walked in proudly, wearing his trademark singlet, flowery shorts, and slippers. I can participate in the integrated warfare contest like you guys now. Kicking his slippers to the shoe rack, Lung walked barefoot to the living room and took out a bottle of cold beer from the fridge. Then he sat on the sofa like Silen and the other 2. Seeing that Silen and the other 2 did not respond, Lung shouted in dissatisfaction, "Hey, aren't you curious?" Silen and the other 2 looked at Lung at the same time, with a curious about what look on their faces. Lung grinned. "I woke up early in the morning to stop the Lord Headmaster and asked him to open the back door for me." Silen and the other 2 were speechless. He was the only one who could walk through the back door with such confidence. Although the name list had not been finalized yet, it was certain that these 4 would be in the top 10. The next day, the list of 10 candidates was announced on the Seven Lights forum. After seeing the name list and information display, there would be unknown people loitering around Silen and the others' accommodation at every moment, wanting to see what Shadow X's true identity looked like. Shadow X's information display that everyone was looking forward to was shockingly nuanced Silen's name. The first reaction of the Seven Light students when they saw it was, "What the fuck? Why is it him?" At the time, Alan wanted to cry, but had no tears. Now he finally understood that he had been tricked by Silen. Other than word games, Alan had also vaguely guessed some things. Sure enough, it was just like what his father had said. He had to trust his first instinct. Otherwise, he would be fooled. Although the name list that was announced caused a great commotion, in truth, there were not many who objected to it. There were still a lot of people who doubted the news that Silen was Shadow X at first, but they were relieved when they thought about it. After all, he had participated in a military mission, gone to the battlefield, killed black mice, and was familiar with Knight and the others. Even if they wanted to object to it, they would have to consider whether they had the ability to do so. Since there were no major problems, the higher-ups of Seven Lights quickly made their decision and officially confirmed the list of 10. Fu Luo, Silen, Knight, Surd, Hard, Long Pride, C.I. Jinsheng, Kong Man, Copley. It was worth mentioning that 6 out of the 10 were new students. It didn't matter if they were specially recruited students or not. In short, If they could achieve a good result in the integrated warfare contest this time, then this phenomenon would be used by Seven Lights as an advertisement. The day before the integrated warfare competition, the four of them were tidying up in the living room when Scyllin's communicator suddenly rang. Not long after, Scyllin walked out. "I'm going out for a while." Lung narrowed his eyes. "A date?" "No." Before he left, Scyllin even snatched a bag of dried meat from Knight. "Holy shit, you better return it double when you come back." Knight yelled at the top of his lungs. Scyllin waved his hand, indicating that he understood. Lung watched Scyllin leave on a hoverboard and let out a vulgar laugh. "It's not a date? Who would believe that? Guess who Scyllin is going on a date with?" "Is there even a need to guess?" "Of course it's Beauty Saw. He'll definitely give her a goodbye kiss." Knight opened the cabinet and counted how many bags of dried meat he still had. He planned to bring all of them with him tomorrow. "Not necessarily. I heard that Ling Long from the research division is a little interested in Scyllin as well." While saying this, Lung even purposely displayed Ling Long's image for Knight and C.I. Jincheng to see. "Not bad, right? She's also an elite of the research division." Before Lung could finish, the dormitory's doorbell rang. Who would come at this time? Lung muttered and reluctantly ended a sentence. He turned on the display and looked at the person standing outside the door. After seeing the image on the display, Knight and C.I. Jincheng turned to look at Lung. Lung raised his hands. "All right, pretend I didn't say anything." The person who came was Ling Long. This was the first time Ling Long came to their dormitory. After entering the room, Ling Long was obviously disappointed when she did not see Scyllin at first glance. C.I. Jincheng looked at the time. Scyllin left for 2 minutes and 25 seconds. Judging by Scyllin's speed on a hoverboard, you won't be able to catch up. Ling Long frowned, looked at the decorations inside the dormitory, and accepted the water Lung's robot passed to her. "When is Scyllin coming back?" "That I don't know. Who knows what he and Beauty Saw are going to do?" Lung did not know if Knight's words were intentional or not, but when Ling Long heard this, Lung clearly felt the pressure around him become much lower. The trio pretended that they did not see the pitiful cup in Ling Long's hand that cracked a few times and tidied up the things in their hands. Knight had flipped a singlet over and over again countless times, and he looked pretty busy. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours passed, and Scyllin still had not returned. Scyllin had left his communicator at the dormitory, so he could not be contacted. Feeling the pressure around Ling Long growing lower and lower, Knight gave Lung a look, and Lung expressed that he could not do anything. However, after Ling Long received a message, the trio suddenly felt as if spring had bloomed inside the room. A bright smile appeared on Ling Long's face as she stood up and said, "Scyllin has gone to Professor Mo's place. It should be a while before he returns, so I won't disturb you any longer. Goodbye." After Ling Long left, C.I. Jincheng said thoughtfully, "She looks a little familiar." Scyllin had indeed been summoned by Sir M.O. with a call. Since Scyllin had gone straight to M.O. Heng's staff dormitory in Seven Lights instead of the research division, Ling Long had received the news a little later than usual. M.O. Heng was a little dissatisfied with Scyllin's participation in the sector championship, so he asked Scyllin to assemble another machine before he left. If he passed, then he could participate in the integrated warfare contest. If he failed, then he would have to obediently stay in the research division and assemble machines. M.O. Heng did not ask for a particular machine to be assembled. He allowed Scyllin to design and choose his own parts to assemble. As the vice headmaster, Mo Heng had a special workshop in the dormitory. There were plenty of parts and equipment, and they were all high-end products. Scyllin had spent a lot of thought on this machine, so it took him a little longer than usual to assemble it. Scyllin was very satisfied with the machine he assembled. After the assembly was complete, the inspection results were also very satisfactory. There was no regression, and it was still 97%. That was why 2 clear finger marks were left on Scyllin's face. Scyllin suspected that he would return to the baby fat stage if this continued. After leaving Mo Heng's dormitory, Scyllin went to the research division and tidied up the things in the workshop. When he walked out of the research division, he ran into Teresa, and Teresa said with a smile, "Congratulations to your father for winning the position of heir." She did not say much. It was just one sentence, but there was too much information contained within it. Everything was understood without words. It was time to end the mission. Chapter 70. Over at the training division, the sky was just beginning to brighten, and the place was already active an hour earlier than usual. The students attending military class had surprisingly early start and ran to the training division's specially set up port. They all stretched their necks and looked around. Gerard ignored them. This was something that happened every year, and it might not necessarily be a bad thing for these students. At the very least, it could stimulate them to work harder. Not long after, a passenger flying car landed at the port's parking spot. The first person to walk down from the car was a dean of 7 lights, followed by Fu, Luo, Pride, Knight, Silin. All 10 of them were wearing specially made uniforms that were sky blue in color. The 7 lights integrated warfare uniform was different every year. The 7 colors alternated between each year. Last year it was green, so this year's main color was blue after green. Printed on the chest of the uniform were the 7 lights school insignia of red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. The back of a jacket had the 7 lights logo and the students' names. Everyone's uniform was unique. This uniform symbolized a kind of honor, the honor of representing 7 lights in the sector championship integrated warfare. The moment they saw them, the surrounding students began to discuss among themselves. Which one? Which one is Shadow X? The one beside Fu Luo, the one with light gray hair, he's Shadow X. I can't tell. The 10 of them ignored what the students were saying about them and followed the head of teaching. Silin and the other 3 were still in a daze. Lung, who was so excited that he couldn't sleep last night, had dragged the 3 of them to play cards for the entire night. Although he had won every cent of the black rat claws in Lung's pocket, he had sacrificed his sleep time. That was why all 4 of them came over with dark circles under their eyes in the morning. Yo, the 4 of you went to catch thieves last night? Gerard looked at the group of people walking over. His gaze landed on Silin and the others, and he immediately noticed their serious lack of sleep. We played cards for the entire night. Silin covered Lung's mouth just as he was about to continue speaking. Only an idiot like him would speak the truth so confidently in a situation like this. Didn't he see the veins popping out on the teaching director's forehead? Knight and C.I. Jinsheng turned their heads away from Lung at the same time. Dude, can you be any more idiotic than that? The dean's task was to hand these 10 people over to Gerard, who would lead the team to Planet C, N976. After the 2 finished talking, Gerard led the 10 people to board the starship. There was 7 lights insignia on the starship, and there were other medical and staff members inside. These people were all selected through training, and most of them were from the training division and the security division. The starship had arranged individual lounges for the 10 of them. After Silin and the other 3 boarded the starship, they went straight to the lounge to catch up on sleep. The others also found it boring and returned to their own lounges to watch the video recordings of the previous integrated warfare battles. In the next few days on the starship, Gerard told them some things to pay attention to and some past experiences, and then answer their questions. In order to achieve good results, the most important thing was cooperation. So Gerard gave them more time to get used to each other so that they would not mess up. By the time Silin's group arrived at Planet C, and 976, the people from the 4 military academies were already there. Other than that, there were also 2 teams from Sector B's universities who had arrived earlier than them. Just like the 7 Light students, they were most concerned about Shadow X's true identity. But when they saw Silin, they found it very hard to believe that he was Shadow X. From the outside, Silin did not look like the Shadow X in everyone's hearts. He looked more like a rich young master. There was a 12-floor building in the camp built specifically for the participating students. The second floor was the dining hall, and above the second floor were the dormitories. Each team occupied 1 floor, and the universities had decided their floor by drawing lots beforehand. Therefore, it was already decided which floor they would be staying on, and there was nothing to object to even if they had any opinions. There was also a wide gym next to the student dormitories. There were indoor gyms and outdoor gyms, and Silin and the others were familiar with the indoor gyms. The outdoor gyms were much more abundant. There were hoverboards, flying cars, armors, fighter jets, and so on. Moreover, they were all military grade, and the performance was much better than the average. When a lot of students came here, they could even fly their fighter jets out for a spin if they were bored. Unfortunately, the scenery here wasn't that great. There were either mechanized buildings everywhere or large areas of field battlefields. Green hills and clear waters were out of the question, and a myriad of colors and colors could only be seen in one's dreams. Scyllin, do you want to give it a try? Knight hooked his arm around Scylin's shoulder and pointed at the fighter jet parked on the field. Fighter jets might be a little new to other students. After all, they could only come into contact with them on the virtual platform, and not many people had flown real fighter jets before. But Knight came into contact with them at a very early age. Before he could even walk, his father had carried him on a stroll in the plane. Of course, Knight was staying inside the protective cabin at the time. Otherwise, it would have been more than enough to handle with Knight's infant physique at the time. Sure, Scyllin answered straightforwardly. I want to participate too. Why don't the four of us have a match? Lung pointed at C.I. Jinsheng, who was reading at the back, and said, Good idea. C.I. Jinsheng, do you want to come? Knight looked at C.I. Jinsheng. C.I. Jinsheng closed his book. Of course. The four of us in the dorm will go for a walk. Pride raised his chin and snorted. What's there to walk about? These planes didn't even have homing missiles on them. They were completely placed here to fool the students. Only those who had never seen or flown a fighter jet before would be curious about them. Knight's eyes slanted at Pride's disdainful snort. The one who loses in a fight has no right to snort. Pride's face turned bright red from Knight's words. He wanted nothing more than a charge at Knight and fight it out with him. He had indeed lost 2 out of 3 fights against Knight on the Sector Championships platform. If one wanted to use a fighter jet in the training field, they would need to register first. Surd and the others had wanted to try flying as well. But since Knight said that the 4 of them wanted to compete first, Surd decided to wait and see how they flew first. Although he had touched fighter jets before, this was Sector C after all. Surd felt even more excited. Scyllin and the other 3 had chosen the same model. After registering, the 4 of them boarded their respective fighter jets. Not far away, the people of the 4 military academies, be it in the training room or the accommodation, all smiled expectantly when they saw the 4 fighter jets taking off from the training field. Kamas leaned against the railing and watched the 4 fighter jets take off into the distance. He said, They'll probably encounter that situation too, won't they? Feng Haichao turned on the display device on his hand, and a hologram that popped up showed the images of the 4 fighters. Of course, those people up there love to tease the students. Knight probably wouldn't have thought that something like that would happen in a place like this either. However, he wouldn't be able to notify the others when he discovered it. I'm so looking forward to it. Yulu yawned and moved closer to the hologram. Chapter 71. On the other side of the camp, the team leaders and the officers stationed at the camp were gathered together and chatting. The lowest military rank of the people in this room was Lieutenant Colonel. Since there was no one else around, these usually stern officers were more casual now. Judging from their tone of conversation, they were all familiar with each other. Gerard, why are you leading the team this time? Wasn't it always Juanil before? Someone asked. Everyone knew that the thing Gerard disliked the most was being a babysitter. Therefore, when Gerard and Juanil were sent to Planet 7 Lights, Gerard chose the security division and not the training division. Gerard did not have the patience to take care of those young masters and ladies in the training division. He could lead troops, but not students. If the things he learned from his superiors were applied to the students, they would probably lose a layer of skin in less than 2 days, even if they didn't die. Moreover, many of the students in 7 Lights had some background. Gerard wasn't afraid of them, but he didn't want to get himself into trouble. Gerard couldn't be bothered to deal with those twists and turns. That was why Juanil had been the one leading the integrated warfare for the past few years. Juanil has something to do, so I'll be leading this time. But you don't look like you're unwilling. You used to be an excuse, didn't you? The speaker kicked Gerard on the chair and said, It's mainly because the candidates this time are pretty good. I even picked 6 of them myself. Gerard wanted to laugh when he thought of those people in the team. God knows what kind of trouble those bastards would cause. You even picked 6 of them yourself? Only 4 of us were chosen by me. The other 6 were decided internally, another man complained. People like them always spoke with strength, but Sector B's rules were obviously a little more complicated. Sigh, let's not talk about those annoying topics. Being a babysitter is already annoying enough, and you still have to talk about them here. Someone slapped the armrest of the chair and said, the team leaders and station officers of the 4 military academies were amused. Thank goodness they weren't assigned to Sector B. Speaking of which, Gerard, you'll be back in a year, right? A station officer said. Yeah. Gerard couldn't be more excited at the mention of this. They all had 5 years of missions. Once the mission was over and they returned to the army, their military ranks would rise as well. Right now, both Gerard and Juanillo were senior colonels. Their next step was to be promoted to Major General. Hey, congratulations on being free first. We still have 2 more years. Don't forget to treat us when the time comes. As they were talking, someone suddenly said, Hey, Gerard, it's the kid from your team. Gerard looked at the screen that the man was pointing at and chuckled. Why is it these 4 guys again? The others also looked at the screen. There was a list at the side, showing the registration of the fighter jets. I knew Knight wouldn't be able to hold back. There were a few people here who were soldiers under Knight's father like Gerard, so they were familiar with Knight. This is the Shadow X they're talking about. One of them pointed at Silin. There's even the eldest young master of the Andryra family. I heard that the old generals were so pissed off by the old Andryra family's old man that they almost vomited blood. They all knew about the trivial matters between the old Andryra family's old man and the military's elders. They quarreled almost every other day, but it had been almost 100 years, and they never got serious. Yet, they always liked to pick each other's faults and cause a quarrel. Some of the military's funds were swindled from the old Andryra family by the old generals. Those who could swindle things from the Andryra family were all old foxes. As for C.I. Jincheng, they tacitly avoided talking about him. They didn't want to talk about the surname too much. Want to tease them? Nonsense. Do you want to waste such a good opportunity? They've delivered themselves to our doorstep. Gerard dragged a chair over. Go ahead and tease them. These 4 guys have strong endurance. Roger. The officer rolled up his sleeves excitedly, flexed his fingers, and chuckled mischievously. Other than him, the others in the room also dragged their chairs over and gathered in front of the screen, their eyes full of interest as they watched. At this moment, the 4 people who were happily flying in the air were still chatting leisurely. They hadn't entered their competitive state yet. In reality, most of the time, Silin and the other 2 were listening to Lung's shouts through their earphones. Wow, there's a C. I didn't expect there to be a sea here. Huh. Silin, look. The shape of the reef area on the sea looks like the buttocks of a voluptuous beauty when she bends down. Silin and the other 2. Wouldn't most people use the shape of a heart to describe it? Why does everything sound different when it comes out of this guy's mouth? Over at the surveillance room, Gerard facepalmed. He had already experienced this guy's idiotic nature, so he was somewhat prepared. Meanwhile, the few people leading the team in the room looked at the garrison officers with an expression that said, so you guys like this. The garrison officers were so angry that they wanted to run over and beat that guy up. That reef area was formed naturally. It had nothing to do with them. Now, they finally understood why the old generals were always so angry at the old man of the Andryra family. There was a drill going on in the sea below, and the underwater explosion had raised the seawater there high up. Since it wasn't a regular drill, this area wasn't locked down. But most students who pass by this area in their fighter jets would be smart enough to avoid it. Oh, that's caused by a torpedo. Torpedo? How spectacular. It's an eye-opener. Bullsh asterisk T. Bullsh asterisk T. Have you really never seen a torpedo before? The number of torpedoes your family makes is enough to destroy an entire sector. The officers in the surveillance room were so angry that they wanted to pull out their guns and rush over. How could this bastard say the bullshit of eye-opening in such a so-so tone so calmly? Gerard continued to hold his forehead. After a garrison officer opened his communicator and issued a few orders, someone on the warship on the sea opened fire at the sky. Although the people on the sea opened fire at the sky, their intentions were clear. They were only trying to force them away. Scylla and the other three pulled the fighter up into the sky, but when they rose to more than 20,000 meters, Knight suddenly remembered something. Before he could speak, his communicator buzzed. The signal had been jammed. Not only that, the fighter's propulsion system had malfunctioned as well. The engine had shut down, and the fighter was falling straight down. Holy shit. Nat cursed. How could he have forgotten about this? Right now, those officers were definitely looking forward to watching them embarrass themselves. All kinds of panic, all kinds of panic, all kinds of despair, all kinds of panic. This was what the officers sitting in the monitoring room wanted to see. During some military pilot selections, something like this would be done to test a pilot's adaptability. After staying at Sector B for a long time, Knight had forgotten about it. Right now, they were in the military's supervision territory, so they were using the military's tricks. However, the other three should be able to handle it, right? Chapter 72. The communicator couldn't be contacted, and the other communication and positioning devices couldn't be used either. There was no parachute, and the emergency cabin couldn't be opened. Logically speaking, under such circumstances, the pilot in the cockpit wouldn't be feeling well either. This was what the officers wanted to see. In a situation of near despair and helplessness, the students would better reflect the situation. The officers were looking forward to the four fellows' reactions, but reality slapped them hard in the face. Knight's reaction was understandable. He definitely had a certain level of understanding towards this situation, and it was to be expected that he could face it calmly. However, C.I. Jincheng was even calmer than Knight. Knight was more or less worried about the other three, but C.I. Jincheng had nothing to worry about at all. The moment the mechanical system lost its function, C.I. Jincheng calmly took out a book and read it with great interest. C.I. Jincheng did not forget to nod and smile politely at the hidden monitor before he started reading. The officers inside the control room immediately darkened. Boring. Then they looked at Lung. Lung blanked out for 2 seconds after the power system failed. Then, he said disdainfully, "I can't believe the great military would buy such inferior goods. I remember that the military's allocation was pretty good. Could it be that there were only some defective goods left when the resources were allocated here? Or," Lung muttered to himself endlessly, completely ignoring the falling fighter. In the end, he even came to a conclusion. The troop station at the border were all stepmothers. Although their communicators were jammed and could not communicate, there were still hidden monitors inside the cockpit. The officers heard every word of Lung's words without missing a single word. Inside the control room, the team leader looked at the station officers with eyes full of sympathy. It wasn't that he truly agreed with Lung's words, but that he pitied them for being looked down upon by Lung. The station officers were so angry that they almost spat blood. This place was not like the primitive zones at the edge of the 13 backward sectors. Even if this was the border, it was the border between Sector C and Sector B. How could it compare to a primitive border? Moreover, the highly armed fighter jets were not placed in the student camp here. They were placed elsewhere. Not only did they fail to scare Lung this time, they were even looked down upon by him. This was just the beginning. After Lung was done with his disdain, the fighter descended to about 10,000 meters or so. Lung suddenly took out a small square box from his pocket and ejected it from one of the fighter's ports. The small square box was split into 5 small pieces and attached to the wings, fuselage, and tail respectively. In Lung's hand was a palm-sized control device. When he pressed a button, a large fan extended out from the 5 small pieces, and the fighter's falling speed abruptly slowed. In the end, it seemed as if it was a thin piece of paper floating in the air. Lung operated the control instrument in his hand, and the small piece on the tail spat out some white mist. As a result, the officers in the control room watched as Lung piloted this fighter whose power system had failed, yet was still drifting about leisurely, drawing a large, smiley face in the air. Gerard was still holding his forehead. He really didn't know how to describe the young master of the Andrira family. As for Scylla, when the power system failed, Scylla glanced around the cockpit, then opened a part of the cockpit, removed the remote controller inside, opened the control panel, and re-entered the program decoding control on the control panel that popped up At the same time, the person in front of the screen in the control room was also typing in the control program to stop Cylin from decoding. 15 seconds later, the screen in the control room showed control disconnected. This meant that the control of that plane was now completely in Cylin's hands. The face of the officer in front of the screen immediately flushed red, and he couldn't say a word for a long time. He was played by an academy, and in less than 20 seconds no less. Gerard patted his shoulder. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. His teacher is M.O. Hung, Sir M.O. He only needs a small compound knife to tear the entire fighter into pieces and then put it back together in one piece. Although Gerard's words were slightly exaggerated, they couldn't deny that Cylin's ability had truly shocked them. After Cylin had gained control of the fighter, he turned on the power system once more and piloted the fighter down. It didn't take long before Cylin saw C.I., Jin Cheng, and Knight's fighter take flight once more, and the power system had returned to normal. The four of them found a parking spot and landed their fighter. Knight also told Cylin and the other two about this common military trick. Most of the time, the fighter the new students piloted had been tampered with and could be controlled remotely. Sometimes the officers would play with a broken wing, the power system would fail, and the energy would suddenly drop to zero. These were all things the officers played with the students. But it was also through these little tricks that the officers would reevaluate the students' abilities. Tisich, don't be so mysterious. My grandfather once said that we can't completely rely on others in times of danger. We have to learn to save ourselves and learn to prepare for a rainy day. Lung tossed the little square box in his hand and then gave Cylin a thumbs up, but Cylin is really amazing. He forcefully seized control of the fighter. It's like he gave the controller a slap in the face. How arrogant. When the four of them returned to the camp, the surrounding students looked at them with obviously different gazes. Surd, Hard, and the others were very impressed by the fact that the four of them had been toyed with by their officers, and if they were the ones in that situation, they would definitely be laughed at by their officers. Although they didn't know how the four of them had handled it, it didn't affect their opinion of the four of them. The people from the military academies, on the other hand, had even more complicated gazes. Not everyone could make their officers fly into a rage, and looking at the faces of those officers today, other than Senior Colonel Gerard, none of them looked good. Sigh, I really want to know how they handled it. Yulu leaned on the railing and sighed, really looking forward to it. Feng Haichao closed the display device in his hand. It could only show the flight situation of the fighter, but not the reactions of the pilots inside the fighter. Knight knew quite a few of the people who came from the military academies, such as Stantine from the 2nd Military Academy. So during dinner, Knight was called down by Stantine for a drinking contest. Not long after Knight left, the communicators of Cylin and the other two rang. Come quickly, you three. Fuck, they're shamelessly trying to wear us down. The 2nd Military Academy's accommodation was on the 6th floor, and 7 Light's accommodation was on the 8th floor. When Cylin and the other two went down, the 10 people from the 2nd Military Academy and Knight were gathered around a table in the living room of accommodation. Knight's feet were on a stool, his hands were on his hips, and his face was already red from drinking. When he saw Cylin and the other two coming over, he snorted and laughed. Brothers from my accommodation, the four of us will fight it out with you today, and you think we can't take you down? Fuck off. Hurry up and call the rest of your people over, or else you'll say that we're bullying you with numbers again. Don't you have a girl with you? Stantine snickered. No need, the four of us are enough. Once Knight's stubbornness flared up, no one could change his mind. Yeah, the four of us are enough. I'll take care of 4 of them, and you can split the remaining 6 among yourselves. Cylin walked to the table and said, bang, before the people from the 2nd Military Academy could voice their opinions. Knight had already slammed the table. I'll take 4. You can split the remaining 6 among yourselves. Lung patted Knight's shoulder. Sigh, there's no need to fight. We'll each take 3, and leave the last one for C.I. Jinsheng. C.I. Jinsheng raised an eyebrow and said nothing. How are we going to drink? Cylin asked. Nonsense, of course we're going to drink the whole bottle in one go. Are you going to sip it mouthful by mouthful like a girl? Stantine yelled. Without another word, Cylin picked up a bottle and chugged it straight away. The bottle was empty in 5 seconds. All right, As expected of Shadow X, I've been wanting to compete with you since a long time ago. Stantine picked up a bottle and started chugging it down. That night, the Second Military Academy's leading officer's face was so dark that a storm was brewing. The 10 of them were actually taken care of by the 4 of them. Knight had drunk too much, and he himself collapsed after taking care of the 3 of them. He was dragged back by Sillin. Lung also drank too much, but his performance was that he was overly excited, yelling about playing cards, singing if he didn't play cards, acting shamelessly if he didn't sing, and refusing to leave. Sillin dragged Knight back upstairs first, and then came over with C.I. Jinsheng to grab one of Lung's hands each, forcefully pulling him back upstairs. That night, Lung sang love songs for the entire night. Fortunately, the soundproofing of every dorm room was pretty good, or else the instructors might just feed him bullets. After the commotion was over, the official integrated warfare battle began after everyone from the 10 academies had arrived. The Second Military Academy's people rubbed their palms together. They lost in a drinking contest and were called up in the middle of the night by their commanding officer to sober up. This grudge must be avenged. Chapter 73. 10 teams departed from Planet C, N976 at the same time and headed towards their destination Planet C, N300. Both planets were located at the edge of Sector C and were supervised by the military. Each team was assigned a small starship, and more than 100 engineering robots assisted the starship in other matters. However, this was only limited to the journey to the destination. Once they arrived at the space station outside the destination planet, these 100 or so engineering robots would enter hibernation mode and could not be brought into the planet to be used as a force to attack other team members. Once they arrived at the space station outside the destination planet, the team members would all change to the spaceplane prepared at the space station and head towards the planet's stronghold. At that time, there would truly only be 10 participating team members. If any technical problems occurred, it would be up to each team member to solve it themselves. The team members were not allowed to bring their own weapons, and they were all distributed by the camp. If there were any special requirements, they could apply for it, and the items applied for would be reviewed by the camp's person in charge. Only those who met the requirements could be brought in. Subspace containers were not allowed to be brought in, and food, energy boxes, and so on were all distributed by the camp as well. This meant that the 10 teams were basically equipped the same way. Only a unified baseline could tell the strengths and weaknesses of each school's students. Gerard and the other team leaders were not allowed to go with the team members and could only take another spaceplane. Moreover, they could only stay at the space station of Planet C in 300 during the integrated warfare. They were not allowed to interfere with the students' actions. The students' mission was to gather 10 energy blocks, and whoever handed in 10 energy blocks first will be the first to complete the mission. There were a total of 100 energy blocks, and they were all buried beforehand. Only the person in charge of the project knew the location of each energy block. No one else knew anything about these energy blocks. Although on average, each team would be given 10 energy blocks, that was not the case. The spaceplanes parked at the stronghold also consumed energy, and the defense system installed on the spaceplanes after landing, energy consumption for living, energy consumption for electronics, and so on all consumed energy. Normally speaking, a team member would need to gather a total of 12 to 13 energy blocks in order to successfully complete a mission. 10 would be used to hand in the mission, and the rest would be used for energy consumption. Seven Light's 10-man team was led by Knight, and Sillin was the vice captain. Knight might look like he couldn't be bothered with you on normal days, but he would become a lot steadier when he truly shouldered responsibility. The 10 teams from the 10 universities gathered at the port not far from the camp and headed towards Planet C, N300. Asteroid C, N300 was the battlefield of the annual integrated warfare. The mechanization on the planet wasn't very serious. There was a C, but it wasn't considered a battlefield of the integrated warfare. There were also garrisons and monitoring stations on the planet, but these weren't within the scope of the integrated warfare. Most of the areas on the planet that served as the integrated warfare zone were jungles, but there were also some large lakes. In order to ensure the supply of food for the students, they even raised some small mammals in the forest. There were also fish in the lake. Highly dangerous giant fish and large animals did not exist in the integrated warfare theater. Therefore, in the integrated warfare, the greatest danger came from the students of other universities. Every student was wearing a special sensor suit. The guns distributed in the camp were not the usual lethal ones, but specially modified ones. The students who were shot would be judged as dead by the sensor suit. If they were judged to be dead, the student would be eliminated. At the same time, the military would send them to the monitoring station on the planet, and they would no longer participate in the battle. For Sillin, this was nothing more than a game, a classic educational game with no real life or death involved. But for many students who weren't from military academies, this was their first battle of great significance. Every team had a specific stronghold on this planet. In the early days, when the integrated warfare team members arrived, they had to fight for strongholds themselves, but later on, it slowly developed into direct distribution. There would always be a lake around each stronghold to solve the students' water problem. After smoothly arriving at Planet Sin 300 space station, the engineering robots inside the starship all entered hibernation mode and didn't move at all. Sillin and the others switched to the space plane that had been prepared long ago and piloted it to land. From now on, everything had to be done by the students themselves. The first thing they did after landing wasn't to scan the stronghold for energy blocks or where the nearest energy block was, but to make preparations. Scan the surrounding terrain and open up the photon panels, Knight ordered succinctly. Although they had obtained maps before coming here, those maps were all from last year. There might be special circumstances, such as the movement of the Earth's crust, that changed the terrain, and they also had to take into account the growth of forests and grasslands, as well as the distribution of small mammals. Only after scanning the surroundings and obtaining a real-time map would it be convenient for their subsequent operations. The reason they opened up the photon panels was to conserve energy. They would absorb the light energy of a star and store it, so that they wouldn't have to use the energy blocks that they had painstakingly collected when they ran out of energy. Map acquired. Kongman's finger moved across the control panel and brought up the map. Analyze the strategic points and begin setting up. After analyzing the strategic points based on the terrain, they had to begin setting up land sentinels for defense within a certain range. They would be able to sound the alarm in time if they were attacked by other team members. Other than that, they also had to set up traps and make corresponding changes according to their own needs. At the same time, CI Jinsheng analyzed the weather and predicted the weather for the next 5 days so that it would be easier to formulate a plan of action. On the night they arrived at CN 300, Knight didn't decide to start the operation. Instead, he let everyone rest first, because once the battle started later on, it would be hard for them to have time to rest. They had to maintain their nerves at all times. Therefore, everyone should take a good rest before the other party started. Lung sprinted into the lake to catch some fish. He didn't look nervous at all. It was more like he was on a vacation. During dinner, Knight looked at Sillin and Lung and said, "I heard that the two of you are being watched." The leading officers of each team had told their team members that whoever was able to eliminate either Sillin or Lung would be rewarded handsomely when they got back. The incident the other day had definitely pissed off those officers. This young master was born to shine brightly and be the center of attention. Lung didn't seem to realize that he was being watched at all. Just don't be an idiot when the time comes. The people that each academy needed to be on guard against had already been mentioned long ago, so Knight wouldn't nag anymore. Fu Luo and Kong Man basically didn't participate in any external confrontations. Kong Man was a pure technical member, while Fu Luo was in charge of medical care. Both of them were in charge of logistics. After dinner, the rest of the team members rested, leaving the members on duty to keep watch. The first night watch was Sillin. He was the one who suggested it, and he had already had a good night's sleep on the starship when he arrived. He had to do something to keep watch. Chapter 74. What is this? Knight stared blankly at something placed on a table in the control room. Knight had climbed out of bed early in the morning. When he opened the control room, he found 5 fist-sized warheads placed on the table in front of Sillin. Knight was willing to bet that he had never seen a warhead like this being distributed in the camp, because the integrated warfare rules stated that air-to-ground weapons were not allowed to be distributed. Serd, Hard, and the others had also woken up early. They were also very surprised when they saw these 5 things in the control room. The 5 warheads had spiral patterns on them, like the threads on a screw. C.I. Jincheng's eyes lit up as he looked at the 5 warheads. There's something inside. That's right. Scylla nodded. C.I. Jincheng walked over and looked at the warheads carefully, then said, "There's a probe inside?" Scylla gave C.I. Jincheng a thumbs up and explained, "According to the plan, Knight and Pride will fly us to Sandborder today. Although the plane is not equipped with offensive weapons, it can carry weapons. These 5 warheads are equipped with probes and jamming devices. Knight and Pride will fire these 5 warheads before the plane lands. They will burrow into the ground and send out signals from underground in order to cut off the Sentinel's defense network and investigate the surroundings." Scylla explained the functions of these 5 warheads to everyone. According to the rules of integrated warfare, the aircraft on the aircraft could not be equipped with offensive weapons. Normally, it could only be used to carry people. In the past, there were people who installed some portable weapons, but the results were not very good. Perhaps it was because many students were used to high-tech combat and had gradually neglected some of the most primitive, basic combat methods. Relying too much on high-end technology and weapons of mass destruction was not very meaningful to the development of students. Therefore, in integrated warfare, large-scale offensive weapons were not equipped. Students basically had to carry their guns and mark red one by one. The so-called mark red was kill. If the sensors on a student determined that the degree of attack was lethal, then the student's clothes would turn red to signify that the student was dead. The marked red students could only stay where they were and wait for the garrison to come and pick them up. The students marked red would be brought to the monitoring station. Although they had already left the battlefield, they could still watch the battlefield through the monitoring station screen. The academy closest to Scylla and the others was Sandborder Academy, who also hailed from Sector B. Sandborder Academy was ranked 8th in total points before the integrated warfare contest, and they were also a relatively famous academy in Sector B. According to Scylla's 5 warheads, Knight slightly adjusted the battle plan. If they succeeded, they would be able to shorten the time taken by 3 times. The less time they used, the greater the advantage they would gain. Some teams would look for energy blocks first, but there were also teams that would take care of the competitors that were closer to them first. As the saying went, how could one allow others to sleep next to one's bed? If they did not take care of this competitor, there would be greater resistance when looking for energy blocks. When that happened, the time wasted would not be just a day or 2. It was obvious that Knight had chosen to use a more forceful method. In the past, the other 4 military academies would also choose this method. Basically, the strongholds that were closer to the 4 military academies would be marked red the next day. Therefore, when Sandborder's people found out that the ones next to them were 7 lights and not the 4 military academies, they were so happy that their mouths were almost crooked. There was a huge gap between them and the 4 military academies, but generally speaking, the academies of Sector B were about the same in strength. There was no such thing as an absolute advantage. Even if 7 Lights had produced 2 experts in the form of Knight and Shadow X this year, Sandborder was not too afraid. They weren't military academies, so what the fuck was there to be afraid of? There were 7 people participating in the attack this time. Fu Luo, Kong Man, and C.I. Jincheng stayed at the stronghold, while the other 7 joined the attack. Each spaceplane was equipped with 2 airplanes. Knight and Pride piloted 1 each. Knight brought Scylla, Lung, and Copley, and Pride brought Serd and Hard. Although Pride had always looked down on others with his nose, he would not be careless when it came to real operations. We're almost at their stronghold. Any closer, and we'll be detected by their sentinels. All right, we'll stop here. Execute Plan A, Knight said into the communicator. Understood. After receiving Knight's notification, Pride turned the plane around and flew in a different direction. After Pride's plane had flown far away, Knight's plane also circled around the surroundings, checking for energy blocks in passing. Unfortunately, There were none nearby. 10 minutes later. Time's up. To prevent the enemy from intercepting their communication, Knight and Pride had set a time. Once the time was up, both sides would fire their warheads at the same time. The trajectory of the warheads was not as close to a straight line as other warheads. Instead, it was irregular, and it was very difficult to predict its next flight trajectory. After the warheads were fired, Knight parked his plane at a certain spot and camouflaged it. Then he, Sillin, Lung, and Copley began to sneak toward Sandborder. It must be said that Pride's ability was pretty good. When Knight had fired his warhead, Pride had also arrived at the desired location and fired his warhead. When Sandborder's air defense alarm indicated that there were missiles moving at high speed in the air, the students were a little skeptical. Weren't there no air-to-ground weapons? What was up with these 5? However, the air defense system did not indicate that any aircraft had entered the warning zone. Since the missiles were fast and their trajectory could not be captured, plus the fact that they did not expect 7 Lights to attack them at all, and from the air at that, the interception was not successful. The missiles were not aimed at their spaceplane. To be precise, these missiles had just entered the edge of the warning zone. The missiles did not explode after they collided with the ground. Instead, they burrowed straight into the ground, and then everything returned to normal. However, this peace did not last long. Sandborder's people discovered that the Sentinel defense network was beginning to be infiltrated, and the speed of the infiltration was extremely fast. Of course, it would be strange if the 2 experts, C.I. Jinsheng and Kong Man, worked together to infiltrate 7 Light's stronghold. They only lasted for 30 seconds before Sandborder's Sentinel defense network was completely paralyzed. Although they guessed that it might be because of the 5 missiles, they could not solve the problem immediately. After all, those 5 things had burrowed into the ground. Inside the 7 Lights spaceplane, C.I. Jinsheng turned on his communicator. Infiltration successful. Beginning red marking. Sandborder's Sentinel system had been crippled, but the probe device carried inside the missile could clearly display all the changes in the surroundings on the screen in front of C.I. Jinsheng. All C.I. Jinsheng needed to do was to inform these situations to the 7 people in charge of the operation, who was nearby, how far away they were, and how many dangers there were in the surroundings would be explained in detail. At the space station outside of Planet C, in 300, the 10 team leaders were sitting and watching. There were many screens, and every team's outdoor movement could be seen through satellite surveillance. There was a screen at the center that did not display the movements, but some blue and red dots. Yesterday, this screen was completely blue, but today there were already red dots, and these red dots meant red marking. Every dot contained a student's information, allowing the officers to know who the dot belonged to. From this screen full of dots, it could be seen that the students of the military academies were a lot stronger than the other academies in Sector B. As usual, all the academies that were close to the military academies would be marked red the next day. No matter how much preparation they had made, they would not last past the second day. The team leaders of the 4 military academies were already numb to this situation. Although the team leaders of the academies marked red were prepared, they were more or less displeased in their hearts. The one who was even more displeased than them was Sandborder's team leader. His dark expression alone showed that he was roaring in his heart right now. Watching the Sandborder students marked red by 7 Lights on the screen, Gerard sat at the side and picked his teeth leisurely. From time to time, he would even hum a military tune, angering the Sandborder team leader so much that he ground his teeth. Chapter 75. Because those marked red could not speak, Ryan nodded helplessly. He didn't run into Shadow X in the combat tournament, but he didn't expect to be marked red by Shadow X in the integrated warfare contest. This could be considered as a lack of skill. You really are a genius. At the same time, there were 2 other people not far away from them. They separated after communicating with hand gestures. One of them would approach Sillin, and the other would enter the lake while his comrade was holding Sillin back to snatch the energy blocks. In reality, the 5 parties had been rather peaceful for the few days after the Red Mark battle. They only searched for the nearby energy blocks and did not attack the other teams. Could it be inside the lake? Lung pointed at the lake and said. Lung believed in Silen's calculation ability, but the detector could not detect the energy blocks. It was possible that they had used some other protection, or it was inside the lake. There was no way they could completely isolate the energy reaction. If that was the case, they might as well not bury it. All right, be careful. Serene seemed to be implying something. When she received the detector, she made a secret gesture. Ignoring Ryan and Bond, Silen Helong left the place and sent an encrypted message to Pride, asking him to come over and take the energy blocks. Sigh, if only I had laxatives. I can sprinkle them down and dissolve them in their lake. Then we could just wait for them to have diarrhea to the point where their vision is blurry and capture them all in one fell swoop and snatch their energy blocks. Lung was getting a little tired of this game of searching for energy blocks. He finally understood that Silen's goal was to force him to the trap he had set up. He didn't know how the rest of the team would react if they found out that he was marked red by Shadow X. What? Ryan was truly shocked this time. He was so excited that he cried out directly. Silen marked out the locations of the energy blocks he had found in his mind. Some of them belonged to Seven Lights, and some of them were found by other teams that they knew of. From these burial spots, he could tell what kind of thoughts the person who buried the energy blocks had, and he could speculate the possible burial spots based on this train of thought. Otherwise, it would be a waste of too much time to continue searching blindly like this. Although it was just a game, this was Silen's last Academy game after all. He would probably never experience it again in the future. In truth, Silen had not been hoping that these traps made of vines would be able to trap these people from the military academy. He was only using these traps to distract these people. To these people from the military academies, traps like this were fine for catching rabbits, but it was impossible for them to catch their feet. However, it was precisely because they felt that it was impossible that they neglected the extremely short and fatal pause that these things gave them at critical moments. Silen did not adopt a defensive stance. Instead, he used the cover of the forest to force his way towards the man. Up until yesterday, every team had found 2 energy blocks, but early this morning, Knight's team had found another one. Hence, Lung was clamoring to find one as well. He couldn't be outdone by Knight. As for the integrated warfare, that was all Long was interested in. Understood. Silen also recognized Bond. He had seen the name list of the participants in the integrated warfare contest and remembered their faces. Seven Light's goal was only 5th place in the first place. Judging from the current situation, Seven Lights only needed to dawdle around while the 4 military academies fought for the top 4 spots. The remaining energy blocks were more than enough for them to wreak havoc. However, Gerard was a little dissatisfied. Maybe those guys would give everyone surprise? Seven Lights had already found 7 energy blocks, but they had used up one of their daily energy consumption. This meant that they still had more than 4 energy blocks to find. After kicking out 5 teams, the search for energy blocks became much easier. Silen nodded, pointed a direction, and walked towards it with Long. However, there was still no response from the detector even after half a day had passed. There were no mountains around them. It was flat ground, and there was a lake in front of them. After the red marking battle on the 2nd day, half of the 10 teams had been kicked out. Long. Since he was marked red, the man immediately laid down on the ground and made a strong gesture at Silen. Lung sat down against a tree and pulled at the leaves beside him in boredom. Not far away, Silen closed his eyes and pondered. The man was a little anxious. He knew that Silen was Shadow X, but he didn't expect Silen to approach him so quickly. Moreover, Silen had basically dodged the moment he was about to shoot, as if he could predict it. He knew that Silen was pressing towards him, but he couldn't stop him. The man could only retreat 1 step at a time. If a bullet could penetrate a tree trunk, it would definitely hit Silen. However, although the guns distributed by the camp were almost as fast as real guns, it was difficult enough to kill a person, much less penetrate a tree trunk. Silen used this to his advantage and swiftly closed in on the newcomer. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The bullets hit the trees that Silen passed by in a flash, but they didn't touch Silen at all. When he saw Silen open his eyes, Lung perked up. "Are you done calculating?" Twisting his neck, Lung took off his jacket accepted the detector in Silen's hand, and jumped into the lake. Not long after, he popped his head out and said excitedly, "There's a reaction, and there are two of them." Silen's hands weren't idle while he was closing in. Bullets flew towards the man at tricky angles, but the man was an experienced man. He was able to dodge the bullets while retreating into the forest. Suddenly, there was a thud. Lung was holding two energy blocks tied together with rope in one hand and the unconscious man in the other. Lung tossed Bond to the side and smiled until his eyes were slits. Now he found 4 blocks, one more than Knight and the others. Let's see how that punk can still show off in front of this young master. The 6 people on patrol were divided into 3 groups. Lung and Silen were in one group, Knight and Copley were in another, and Certain Harbor in another. Pride was in charge of flying the plane between the 3 groups and the stronghold to deliver supplies. If they found any energy blocks, Pride would send them to the stronghold to prevent the people from the military academies from snatching them away. Before the man closing in on Silen could make a move, Silen turned around and fired a shot. He then quickly left the lakeside and hid in the forest to find cover. The man's gun should have been fitted with a silencer, but Silen didn't have one now. This shot told Lung under the lake that someone was coming. He had sent someone nearby earlier, so he made a hand signal to tell Lung to be careful. Silen walked up to the man and looked. The 2nd Military Academy, Ryan? However, energy blocks were harder to find as the tournament progressed. In previous tournaments, it would take around 10 days just to find energy blocks. Sometimes, 1 or 2 days would go by without any results. Ryan's expression changed when he saw the man Lung was carrying. His gaze was complicated. The 2nd Military Academy might still be left behind this time. Even Bond had been marked red. The rest of them wouldn't be able to hold on for long. And Dryra Lung was much stronger than they had imagined. Marked red, that said, Lung dove back into the lake. HM, Lung tossed the detector to Silen. "You don't need to go down. I can handle it myself. Sorry to send you out." Also, Silen pointed in the direction of the lake. "Your partner was also sent out." Chapter 76. What kind of effects do these things have? Lung pointed at the various plants that had been sorted out and placed on the rocks. "You'll know when the time comes." Silen sorted out the remaining plants in his hands and placed them to one side. In truth, Silen hadn't really thought of using this method at first, but the moment Lung mentioned laxatives, Silen thought of this. Lung had only seen those researchers isolate the medicinal components of plants and then synthesize more drugs according to their molecular formula. But now that he saw Silen doing this, he felt that it was a fresh experience. His choice was right. Forming a team with Silen would definitely not be boring. It seemed like he saw a great business opportunity from this. These things can really work? It wasn't that Lung didn't believe it, but that he found it novel. There were a lot of plants here that he didn't recognize, so he just plucked whatever Silen asked him to. Moreover, the treatment for each plant was different. Some flowers needed pollen, while others needed nectar or petals. Although Lung had memorized these things, he didn't really understand them. Silen pointed at the harvested herbs and said, "Before we enter the mechanical era, humans didn't have drug synthesizers, injection tubes, antibiotics, analyzers, or any electronic machinery at all. But they were still able to create all kinds of drugs, be it poison or tonics. They used the most primitive methods, and with these, they were able to concoct the drugs we need. We can poison them just like this and make them have diarrhea." Lung narrowed his eyes, as if he could see the scene of those people from the 4th Military Academy bowing together. "No, it's useless to poison the lake water. Drinking water is filtered and detoxified. Don't touch those herbs." Silen threw a rock over, hitting Lung's hand that was touching the herbs. "These are just grass, and didn't we touch them when we were in the forest before?" "Aya." Lung looked at his right hand. There was a red rash on the hand that had just touched the herbs, itchy and numb. However, this person didn't seem to notice it at all, smiling like he was asking for praise. "See, it really works. What are you laughing at? Can you be any more stupid?" Silen wanted nothing more than to send this idiot flying with a kick. Next to it was a bottle carved from stone. There were a few other herbs soaked in it, and there was also the fragrance of nectar. Silen poured some out and applied it to Lung. 5 minutes later, the red rashes gradually faded, leaving only faint traces. 10 minutes later, there wasn't even a trace left. As if he had seen a rare object, Lung flipped his right palm left and right, and then used his left hand to touch the herb. Sillen, why aren't you reacting? Lung raised his left hand. There wasn't a single red rash. Sillen rolled his eyes at him. This is an allergenic drug. After the first allergic reaction, the body will produce antibodies. However, most people won't develop a memory effect so quickly. This means that you have a good physique. Sillen had sent a secret message to Knight using a sound wave code. Every sound wave code was defined by themselves, so even if it was intercepted by other teams, they wouldn't know the meaning of the message. While Sillen was making the drug and Knight was formulating a plan of action, Surd and Hard ran into the 4th Military Academy. Surd was marked red, and Hard escaped by a fluke. At the same time, at Seven Lights Base, Kong Man, who was controlling the Sentinel surveillance, suddenly discovered that a person had appeared in their alert range. Moreover, this person was walking over rather leisurely and openly, and had no intention of hiding at all. Kong Man notified CI, Jin Cheng, and Fu Luo, and both of them were quite familiar with the person on the screen. This guy, Fu Luo, did not express her opinion, but she did not ask Kong Man to activate the Sentinel attack either. Ignore him, CI Jin Cheng said after a glance. But he's holding a gun. If that guy wants to attack, he won't let you see his gun, much less this kind of gun. All right, Kong Man did not mobilize the Sentinel, but he did not let his guard down either. He had a feeling that the person was very dangerous. However, out of Kong Man's imagination, the person leisurely passed through the Sentinel's alert zone, arrived next to their base's spaceplane, and openly knocked on the door. Open the door, I'm so tired. Kong Man looked at CI Jin Cheng. CI Jin Cheng was responsible for the base's work when the others were out on missions. Open the door, it's fine, CI Jin Cheng said. Kong Man sighed. Since CI Jin Cheng had already said so, and Fu Luo did not express any opinion, Kong Man no longer cared. He opened the cabin door and let the person inside. Yo, Sister Phone, long time no see. The person greeted Fu Luo with a smile after seeing her, looking very familiar. Yilu, what are you doing here? Fu Luo raised an eyebrow at the call of Sister Phone and asked. Yilu shrugged. It's too noisy over there. They're busy marking the 2nd Military Academy red, so I came here to sleep since I have nothing to do. Nothing to do? Come here to sleep? Kong Man felt that it was absurd. This person actually had the leisure to find a quiet place to sleep while his teammates were busy marking the red. But looking at Fu Luo and CI Jin Cheng's expressions, it seemed that they were already used to this way of saying things. If you're not participating in marking the red, then why are you participating in the integrated warfare contest? Fu Luo asked. To watch the show, of course. Plus, I'm on vacation, so I came here to play since I had nothing to do anyway. Seeing that Kong Man kept staring at the gun in his hand, Yilu smiled. With a flick of his finger, the gun in his hand disassembled into several parts and fell neatly on the round table nearby. Kong Man's eyelids twitched. This guy was a dangerous person. Yilu yawned and asked, Is there a place to sleep? Find one yourself. CI Jin Cheng answered without turning his head. Can I go to the bedroom? No. Yilu looked around, dragged a few chairs over, and put them together. Then, he laid on top of them and yawned again. Wake me up when they go to turn in their mission. Otherwise, don't wake me even if they're all marked red. After saying that, Yilu closed his eyes and went to sleep without caring if anyone else agreed or not. Kong Man was dumbfounded. This person really was a weirdo. Ignore him. Pretend he doesn't exist. CI Jin Cheng said to Kong Man. How could they ignore such a dangerous person here? Kong Man curled his lips, sat down in front of the monitor, and continued his work. 5 minutes later, Kong Man couldn't hold it in any longer and turned to ask CI Jin Cheng and Fu Luo, who is he? 1st Military Academy's 2nd-year student, 18 years old. Known as the 1st Military Academy's once-in-a-thousand-years shooting prodigy. He sat firmly at the top of the 1st Military Academy's shooting ranking during his first year, and also started carrying out military missions during his first year. After graduation, he would at least be awarded the rank of second lieutenant in the League of Stars. Fu Luo introduced to Kong Man, 18 years old. Second lieutenant in the League of Stars. It wasn't that easy to rise in the ranks of the League of Stars. Guns in the integrated warfare contest aren't really guns to him at all, so he probably didn't fire a single shot in the integrated warfare contest. Listening to Fu Luo's explanation, Kong Man looked towards the person snoring on the chair. You really can't judge a book by its cover. Chapter 77. No, I won't do it. Pride looked like he would never do it, even if he was beaten to death. He would rather not pilot the plane and just pick on the people from the other military academies. But he would never do that. He was a pilot of a fighter jet, not a pesticide sprayer. Knight told Pride about the plan when he asked him to come over, and after pondering over Silen's suggestion, Knight reformulated the operation plan. They would spray the pesticide directly from the plane. Not only would it be more efficient that way, the success rate would also be a little higher as well. Since Surd had been marked red, there were only 6 of them left for the operation now. The best combination would be one pilot the plane while the other 5 moved. If they used 2 people to pilot the plane, then 4 people moving would be too much of a stretch. But Pride rejected him directly before he even finished listening. As if he had expected this, Knight did not have much of a reaction and said indifferently, "Then you go mark red, I'll fly the plane. It's the same with or without you anyway." Knight was still muttering as he turned around and left. "Tisich, you don't even know how to spray the pesticide. No wonder you lost the plane battle. You. Let me tell you, goading is useless." Although he said that, Pride's expression clearly showed that he was ready to listen to the plan. Knight curled his lips. He really did not know how the G family had raised such a freak. After ignoring Pride's earlier words and explaining the plan to Pride, Knight sent encrypted messages to both CI, Jin Sheng, and Silen. Hard was currently on his way to meet up with Silen Helong, and Silen would tell him how to act when the time came. If a game always followed a set pattern, then it would be meaningless. So, when Knight heard Silen's suggestion, he was very much in agreement. Perhaps this operation would be an epic-making event in the history of the Sector Championships integrated warfare. After all, no one had thought of using such a despicable method in the past, right? After the first few days of peace and quiet, the atmosphere between the 4 academies began to grow tense. Usually, at this time, they would start attacking each other. Prometheus High School, which was marked red by the 1st Military Academy, Billy Academy, which was marked red by the 2nd Military Academy, Wagner High School, which was marked red by the 3rd Military Academy, Kirilag High School, which was marked red by the 4th Military Academy, and Sin Border Academy, which was marked red by 7 lights, were all there. There were also military academies, which were marked red by the 1st Military Academy, such as Ryan and Bond. When Surd was first brought there, he was filled with emotions, and the people from the other universities looked at him strangely. It was not the gaze of a loser, but one of curiosity and fear of the unknown. Of course, the people from Sam Border were definitely not friendly. 7 Lights was truly unusual this year. No one had expected that 7 Lights would adopt the same offensive strategy as the military academies, and the time they took to eliminate Sam Border was not any longer than the other 4 military academies. There were many people who hoped that 7 Lights could be the dark horse this time and step on one or more of the 4 military academies. If that happened, then the legend of the military academies would be broken. When Ryan and Bond were brought to the surveillance station, many people looked as if they had seen a ghost. Bond especially, he was a special class student. Although they had never seen him participate in the Sector Championships arena before, it was publicly acknowledged that Bond was stronger than Ryan. There were a lot of screens in the surveillance station, and through the multi-angle view of the satellite array, it was possible to watch the actions of the people who were not marked red. Every academy and every student's focus was different. Many of them were paying close attention to Shadow X and Lung, because the instructors had declared that they would pay close attention to them. But now, they no longer had that chance, so they could only wait and see who could mark these 2 people red. It was because of this that some people were able to see Bond and Lung's scene. No one saw what happened under the surface of the lake. The only thing they knew was that when Lung surfaced to the shore, he was carrying an unconscious Bond. Then, He threw Bond on the shore and marked him red. At that moment, many people could not help but shudder, including a couple of military officers. In truth, Bond himself did not know what happened at the time. After he dove into the lake and swam downstream, he could clearly sense Lung's position. But just as he was about to act, Lung suddenly changed direction and swam straight towards him. That kind of speed, Bond felt that it was not something a human could possess. At the time, Bond felt more like he was facing a certain sea monster in the deep sea. But before Bond could react, his vision turned black and he fainted. When he woke up, he was already at the surveillance station. It was exactly because Seven Lights was the center of attention that when Surd was brought here, many people tried to strike up a conversation and fish for information. However, Surd was not in the mood to deal with other people right now. Since he was marked red, Seven Lights' operation team would probably make some changes. Surd switched his observation point and observed the actions of every person in Seven Lights. After cooperating with them for so many days, Surd had some understanding of their operation methods. Suddenly, Surd's hand paused as he pressed the switch button. He zoomed in on the image, and when he saw clearly, he immediately narrowed his eyes. This was because when he switched to Pride's observation point, he discovered that there was a device on Pride's plane, and Surd was absolutely certain that it was Scyllin's handiwork. What kind of dirty trick did Scyllin come up with this time? Surd prepared to lock his observation point onto Pride. He knew that this thing Scyllin had installed on the plane would definitely be the fuse if there was an operation. Moreover, it was definitely the highlight of this operation. When someone saw that Surd had locked his observation point onto Pride, they also adjusted their observation point and stared at Pride. Although they did not know what was going to happen on Pride's side, since Surd had chosen to lock onto Pride's point, they would do the same. Surd was a Seven Lights member after all, and they should have some sort of tacit understanding with each other. Yes, something was definitely going to happen. At the same time, there were also some students who did not notice Surd's actions and were observing the other people in Seven Lights who began to shout, "Seven Lights is playing with fire this time." It looks like they're taking action, and it's against the 4th Military Academy. Seven Lights group was heading towards the 4th Military Academy's stronghold. They're actually targeting the 4th Military Academy's stronghold. Isn't that a little too bold? Some students began to pay serious attention when they heard these words, but even more people chose to pay attention to the 1st Military Academy right now. This was because the 1st Military Academy and the 2nd Military Academy were in a heated battle right now, and the battle between the military academies was very entertaining, intense, and enjoyable to watch. That was why they chose the 1st Military Academy between Seven Lights and the 1st Military Academy, and that was why they would regret it later on. Half a day ago, the 3rd Military Academy had attacked the 4th Military Academy's stronghold, but the 4th Military Academy's personnel had returned quickly, and their defense was excellent. After both sides had one person marked red, the 3rd Military Academy's personnel saw that their attack was futile, and logically speaking, it was unwise to attack the 4th Military Academy's stronghold at this time, because almost all of the 4th Military Academy's personnel had returned to the stronghold, and the person who marked Surd red had also returned to the stronghold. An hour later. Holy shit, what the hell is this? The people who had pointed their observation point at Pride roared. Chapter 78. The cry attracted a lot of people, and those who saw the scene could not help but sigh. Seven Lights sure was a troublemaker. Pride's piloting skills were indeed pretty good, although he'd lost 2 out of 3 mech battles against Knight. And perhaps in terms of attack power, Pride was still slightly weaker than Knight. If he didn't attack and only dodged, even Knight would have a hard time finding gaps in Pride's flight. The 4th Military Academy was very surprised by Seven Lights' attack. They actually chose this time to attack their base when all their members were present. Had Seven Lights gone mad this time? But in the Sentinel alarm, only Pride, who was piloting the plane, appeared. No one else from Seven Lights could be seen. However, since Pride was here, the others could not be far away either. The 4th Military Academy began to enter a state of alert. Although Seven Lights was not from Sector C, there were a few very troublesome people in Seven Lights. Therefore, the 4th Military Academy decided to be careful to avoid unexpected failure. The strange thing was that Pride was only flying the plane around the perimeter. The sentinels outside the 4th Military Academy's base did not have much firepower, and their ground-to-air firepower was lacking. This was why Pride could leisurely circle around the perimeter. Ignore him. Let him do as he pleases, the 4th Military Academy's captain said. He felt that Pride would not do something like this because he was bored to death. There must be someone behind this, and Seven Lights was definitely plotting something. Therefore, he chose to deal with the situation with an action. After all, the other party was only hanging around the perimeter. However, Pride's hanging around did not last long before it started to deteriorate. The thick brown-yellow smoke sprayed out of the plane gradually moved towards the 4th Military Academy's base along with the breeze. Pride flew the plane back and forth with the wind, and the brown-yellow smoke grew thicker and thicker. The optical equipment could not see the scene inside the smoke at all. At the surveillance station, the students saw this scene of brown-yellow smoke. They're actually using smoke? That's not the point. How'd they get this smoke? The camp did not distribute anything related to smoke grenades at all. Inside the 4th Military Academy spaceplane, the technical student did not grow nervous because of the brown-yellow smoke. Just because the optical equipment was not good didn't mean there was no other way. Smoke is already outdated. Before he could finish, he noticed a missile warning. It was the same missile that Seven Lights had used to slaughter Samborder. However, the 4th Military Academy was also capable of intercepting 2 of the 3 missiles, and only one managed to burrow into the ground. When they learned of Seven Lights' method of dealing with Samborder, the people of the 4th Military Academy had already made relevant preparations. That was why they were able to adjust their interceptions in time when the missiles appeared. Even if they missed one, they could immediately start the anti-invasion program. But a sentinel in the outer perimeter has been destroyed. Destroy it with manpower. Someone has infiltrated the smoky area. Although the invasion on Seven Lights' side had yet to succeed, it did cause some trouble for the Sentinel system and made it less responsive. This gave the infiltrator an opportunity to take advantage of, and once they had infiltrated, destroying this Sentinel that had been disturbed by the invasion would be a walk in the park. Seven Lights' main breakthrough point was the missile that had successfully burrowed into the ground, because radar detection was useless in that area. Moreover, that area was also shrouded in brownish-yellow smoke. Seven Lights must have made preparations beforehand, and the 4th Military Academy would not be able to gain the upper hand if they sent their men over. At the same time, the smoke was spreading towards them, and Seven Lights could also follow the smoke and break in. If they did not take measures in time, it would be troublesome if they were to break in. Captain, I'm going to read them. I'm going to. Me too, wait. The 4th Military Academy's medical student frowned and said, I've analyzed the smoke's composition, but because the equipment we're equipped with isn't fully functional, we don't know if they're harmful to the human body, even if we've analyzed their composition. From the analysis of the smoke's composition, it could be concluded that most of the smoke came from the plants on this planet. Everyone had come into contact with these plants in the forest, and there were introductions about the plants and animals on this planet since a long time ago. There was no mention of any of them being highly toxic, and even if they were only slightly toxic and would not cause much damage. However, the medical student couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Although every one of them looked harmless, there was no guarantee that they would be lethal if they were mixed together. Because of the smoke, there was no telling if the Seven Lights people were wearing protective gear, and they did not have equipment with more complete functions to conduct an in-depth analysis. There was no way to determine the harmfulness of the smoke. Back at the camp, they were routinely issued a head-to-toe protective suit, but for the longest time, very few people participating in the integrated warfare contest would wear it. It was because it would slightly affect their movements after wearing it, and in a battle between experts, the slightest bit of shadow was fatal. Therefore, more people would not wear protective suits. For safety's sake, 2 of the 4 people who went out wore protective suits, and the other 2 did not, but they did wear gas masks. It did not take long after the quartet entered the smoke zone to discover an anomaly. First, the Seven Lights people were not wearing protective suits, so the 2 4th Military Academy people who were wearing protective suits were taken out by Knight and Silenich. Second, the two 4th Military Academy people who were not wearing protective suits discovered that a lot of red rashes had appeared on the surface of their bodies where they came into contact with the smoke. They were itchy and numb, and they were showing signs of spreading to their surroundings. Even though they were trained, it was very difficult for them to endure this forever. At the same time, they had to stay alert for any attacks around them. However, the duo did not last long before they were marked red as well. The two people who were marked red because they were not wearing protective suits wanted to cry, but had no tears as they stared at the red rashes on their bodies and lay on the ground like corpses. "Yo, you two look pretty comfortable." Lung walked over with an infuriating smile on his face. "You guys are so fucking despicable. To think that you would use such a thing." One of the people lying on the ground said, "All's fair in war. This is called skill, understand?" It was obvious that the duo understood it as well. It was just that they felt uncomfortable on the inside, and that was all they said. Lung looked at them with a pitiful expression on his face. He took out a bottle and poured the liquid inside on the two men's rashes. When he saw that the red rashes were gradually receding, Lung turned around with a smug look on his face. As expected, this young master has the potential to be the savior of the world. The two people lying on the ground really wanted to violate the rules and shoot this bastard red. It's obvious that this thing isn't something you, young Master Lung, can make. What the hell are you showing off for? At the surveillance station, the students could not see the situation inside the smoke. They only knew that the 4 people who went in were marked red. What the hell is going on? The 4th Military Academy is screwed this time. 7 Lights is truly amazing. I didn't think that they would actually be able to hack a military academy team. Sir was very happy right now. He was the one who was marked red by the 4th Military Academy. And now that the 4th Military Academy had been forced into such a state, it was obvious that they would not be able to hold on much longer if this continued. Sir felt a wave of satisfaction when he got his revenge for being marked red, but he regretted that he was not able to participate in this significant red mark battle. At first, the 2nd Military Academy thought that they would definitely be at the bottom this time. Due to Ryan and Bond's accident being marked red, the 2nd Military Academy's strength had greatly decreased. This was also the reason why the 1st Military Academy had set their eyes on them. However, they did not expect to receive another piece of news at this time. The 4th Military Academy had been completely wiped out, and they had been wiped out even earlier than they were. The 2nd Military Academy's originally heavy hearts immediately lightened up. Chapter 79. After the 2nd and 4th Military Academies had been eliminated, the game was almost over. 1st Military Academy was the first to collect all 10 energy blocks, and to everyone's surprise, 7 Lights had collected the energy blocks 2 hours earlier than 3rd Military Academy, obtaining 2nd place for the first time in history. The higher-ups of 7 Lights were probably so happy that their mouths were crooked. God knows how many people would rack their brains to squeeze into 7 Lights next year. In the space station, the officers were sitting inside the observation room. Unlike when they were at the camp, the observation room was quieter right now. The officers were all silent, and everyone except Gerard looked like they were deep in thought. Gerard was very happy. These kids sure lived up to expectations. He had to thank O'Neill for not having the time this time, or this cushy job would never have fallen into his hands. Although he was a little reluctant when he took over, now it looked like it was a cushy job indeed. "Gerard, just what is that kid's background?" The leading officer of 1st Military Academy pointed at Cylin on the screen with his chin and asked, "He's from the Duance family. I don't know how he grew up to be like this." Gerard expressed that he did not know either. About that modified missile, it's not something an ordinary engineer can do. Also, Sermo probably didn't teach him to make that thing, did he? Although it was theoretically possible to make something out of those materials, in reality, the officers had yet to see any of their integrated warfare students able to do so. The first time 7 Lights used that modified missile, there were 5 of them, and they had all been used to slaughter San Border. The materials inside the space plane were only enough to modify 5 missiles, and after the slaughter of San Border, Cylin had dismantled some usable materials from San Border spaceplane and made the 3 missiles used to attack the 4th Military Academy's stronghold later on. I don't know about that. Why don't you ask Sir Mo? Gerard said helplessly. The leading officer of 1st Military Academy shook his head like he was having a cramp. I'm not going. Actually, this kind of talent can totally be absorbed into the army as soon as possible. It's too wasteful to let him develop outside. Another officer lamented. Gerard squinted at him disdainfully. You think we haven't tried? During the last Seven Lights mission, that kid performed very well, and he was even chosen by a lieutenant general sent down from above. Later on, that lieutenant general went to Sir Mo to ask for him, but Sir Mo scolded him so hard that he didn't even dare to make a sound on the spot. Even Huanil and I were scolded so badly that we couldn't even lift our heads for a few days. The moment we saw Sir Mo's car, we ran away as fast as we could. The others fell silent. They had some understanding of Mo Hung, so they could imagine what had happened. Even a lieutenant general was scolded to such an extent, so they, the field officers, should just forget about it. As the integrated warfare ended, the cadets had to return to the starship docked in the space station. This time, the officers were accompanying them. In order to commend everyone, Gerard deliberately used his connections to get some wine from the garrison of Planet C. N300. N300 is C. N976 could be considered a military route. There was no danger, and it was fine as long as there were robots piloting the starship. Everyone drank a little crazily, and even Fu Luo, who usually didn't drink much, drank a little. Adding that to their tense nerves during this period of time, they all slept in their rooms until they landed after drinking. After landing at Planet C, in 976 camp, and holding a summary meeting, the 10 teams returned to their respective academies. Sillin, Seven Lights held a banquet for us, Hard said excitedly while holding a microcomputer. The Sector Championship Forum was in a state of excitement right now, especially the people of Seven Lights. They raised their heads no matter where they went. In the past, they would subconsciously think that they were 3 points lower when they saw a military academy on the Sector Championship platform, but it was different now. They were the 2nd place, and no longer the eternal 5th place. The academy didn't even need to say anything. The students of Seven Lights had spontaneously held a welcoming banquet, and the higher-ups of Seven Lights had directly upgraded the 10 people's Seven Lights cards to green card rank. There were related events at Nightless City and the financial and trade zones, and the 10 people were invited to be their spokespersons. In short, the 10 people were on fire. Their graduation certificates would have a glittering symbol of the runner-up, and it was not something that the previous integrated warfare participants could compare to. Hee. There's even a photo of us in our uniforms. I'm going to post the photos of us on Planet C in 300 later. It'll definitely charm a bunch of girls. We're even going to auction a specimen with our signature on it. Lung's eyes shone brightly. Lung had collected some plants and rocks on Planet C in 300, made the plants into specimens, and had everyone else sign their names on them in preparation for the auction. The rocks should look pretty good if they were to bring them back to be processed. Amen. This time we're going to make a killing when we get back. When the time comes, I'm going to open a little shop at the financial district. You guys must come and support me, especially you, Sillin. You're going to dress up as Shadow X and act as the shop's mascot. Seeing Lung's excited look, Sillin smiled, sure. Not far away, C.I. Jinsheng frowned slightly. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with Sillin's smile. Moreover, the feeling that Sillin gave him during the integrated warfare this time was a little strange. Sillin's performance in the integrated warfare contest was more proactive than C.I. Jinsheng had imagined. C.I. Jinsheng was a man who was good at analysis, and those who were good at mathematics usually had stronger logical analysis abilities. He could infer things that no one else would know from small clues. Perhaps no one else would notice Sillin's smile just now, or they wouldn't think anything of it even if they did. But C.I. Jinsheng couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen next. Hard, Copley and the others were looking forward to returning to Planet Seven Lights. Through the Sector Championships network, they already knew what the current port looked like on Planet Seven Lights. All kinds of slogans, all kinds of billboards with their images, all kinds of fresh flowers and beautiful women. The scene at the port had already been reflected on the forums. All that was left was for them to land. One had to admit that this kind of feeling was truly exciting. Copley wasn't the center of attention in the past. He didn't participate in that biohazard mission, and his influence in Seven Lights wasn't high either. But through this competition, everything about Copley had been dug out. His background, his various information, the courses he had chosen, the other honors he had obtained, and so on were all known to everyone. In comparison, Knight was much calmer. Well, he couldn't say he was calm. It should be said that he didn't feel much at all. The integrated warfare contest was just a game in the first place, a game without life and death battles. Knight wanted to laugh the moment he saw the comments on the forums about how they were stronger than the military academies. Stronger? Strong on my ass. Absurd, Copley, Hard, and Pride might not even be able to survive in a true life and death battlefield. That was why Knight didn't put this game in his heart at all. Under the fervent and expecting gazes of the Seven Lights students, the space plane landed at the port. This time, it wasn't the training division's port, but Seven Lights' main port. Because there were too many students who requested to participate in the welcoming ceremony, Seven Lights decided to let the space plane land at the main port in order to make the welcoming scene a little more spectacular. At the same time, they could also spread this kind of atmosphere to others and attract more people to Seven Lights University. The elevator descended, and after the leader Gerard and his entourage came down, the participants of the integrated warfare contest came out one after another. Their blue uniforms and rainbow-patterned school insignia were especially eye-catching amidst the hubbub of voices. All kinds of close-up shots and videos from every angle were being streamed live on Seven Lights Network at the same time. Entertainment Sleepless City, Financial Trade Zone, Training Division, Research Division, School District, Dormitory District, and so on. Sillin was wearing a perfect smile, but Knight still had a straight face. There was even an impatient expression on his face. Pride still had his chin raised high, his arrogance obvious. C.I. Jinsheng was very calm. Lung was smiling brightly and throwing kisses from time to time. Kong Man was a little nervous. Hard Smile was a little stiff. However, it was at this moment. Uffed, the bullet pierced through the body, bringing with it a splash of blood. The video recording was transmitting everything as it happened to every part of Seven Lights. Everything happened so suddenly. Chapter 80. Following Sillin's collapse, the students at the port began to scream. The excitement from before was completely gone, replaced by panic as they swarmed out of the port in large numbers. If not for the police department's control, stampedes, flying car collisions, and other incidents would have happened one after another. In truth, the school had allowed a lot more people to enter the airport for the sake of publicity, so it was inconvenient for the security team and the training division to move around. However, since there had never been an assassination in public for the past 100 years, they had overlooked it. Gerard and the others were pushed to the side the moment they came down. Because the school had arranged for a ceremonial team to welcome the 10 participating students, Gerard and the others were blocked. That was why Gerard could not determine the attacker's location at first notice. Knight's body was trembling. He felt his throat being squeezed and oppressed. Knight had once been brought by his father to quell a rebellion. Although he did not truly come into contact with that cruel battlefield, he had watched from afar as people were sent flying, collapsed, and splattered with blood. It was just that it was not as painful as it was now. After all, he was not friends with those people, and the ones who had collapsed were his roommates and teammates who drank and carried guns with him. Be it Knight, Gerard, or the other people who were sent down from the military, none of them felt any killing intent at all. No killing intent, no killing intent. It was just a sudden shot. They were truly powerless, and they could not analyze the attacker's location in time. They did not find anything unusual from the surveillance footage sent over from various areas. Without hesitation, Lung took out a drug and injected it into the fallen Sillin. He had always carried it with him to save his life in an emergency. The drug would stimulate the patient's life potential to the maximum, allowing the wounded to obtain greater vitality. After the injection, Lung immediately dialed a number. It was his private medical team in Seven Lights. They had the most advanced analyzers there. He would not put all his hopes on the people of Seven Lights. Fu Luo and the medical staff who had rushed over immediately performed first aid. She could tell at a glance that although the bullet did not hit the heart, it was very close to the heart. Under normal circumstances, Silen's condition should not be this bad. From the looks of it, there should be other substances in the bullet. After the bullet penetrated Silen's body, it hit the space plane behind it and swiftly disintegrated into powder. There was no way to analyze anything else from the bullet, but it was enough to show that this assassination was prepared. Since Lung had injected Silen with medicine as soon as the accident happened, Silen's vital signs were still relatively stable even before he was carried into the emergency cabin. However, he did not expect that on the way to the emergency room, his life signal would rapidly weaken. Before any effective measures could be taken, the life indicator showed that he was dead. Even so, the paramedics still sent Silen to the emergency room for resuscitation, but to no avail. Lung's private medical team also came over, but just like before, they were powerless to save the situation. The toxin was a kind of plant toxin that originated from Sector Z. It was hard to come by in the first place, and the antidote was also rare in the first place. However, the antidote's molecular formula was known, but by the time the antidote was synthesized, its life signal had already stopped. That had smashed several walls of the hospital. Although the people in the hospital were infuriated by Knight's bloodshot eyes and murderous aura, they dared not say anything in front of him. The rest of Seven Lights really did not dare to forcefully drag Knight and Lung, these two people who were brimming with killing intent. However, the duo had left hurriedly after receiving the communication. No one knew what had happened. Aflon, who had become the heir of the Duance family, had sent a message regarding Silen's assassination. Very soon, Aflon's men had come over to send Silen's body and belongings back. Knight and Lung had received C.I. Jincheng's call. Right now, all parties were investigating, but they still had no clue as to who the assassin was. There was no progress at all. The moment they heard that there was news from C.I. Jincheng, the duo quickly returned to the dormitory. C.I. Jincheng was sitting in the living room. He was the calmest person to react to today's incident. Knight was very dissatisfied with C.I. Jincheng's performance, and this dissatisfaction was directly manifested in his tone. Speak. Lung did not speak and sat down on the sofa. His killing intent had not been concealed yet, but his complexion was very bad. Those who knew Lung would know that this kind of behavior meant that a storm of blood would soon follow. Lung had never been a kind person. C.I. Jincheng did not mind Knight's tone at all. Instead, he passed over his personal tablet. This is the message I've deciphered from the code Silen left behind. Take a look first. When Silen was shot, C.I. Jincheng was the closest to him, and it was obvious that this was not a coincidence. After Silen had collapsed, C.I. Jincheng had crouched next to him. At the time, C.I. Jincheng was also very worried and nervous, but when he saw the movements of Silen's fingers, he knew that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. That was also a type of code. It was different from the one Silen had used in the double combat tournament. It was a more complicated code. The former was faster, while the latter was more difficult to decipher. It required multidimensional decoding and matrix analysis. Silen's movements at the time were rather subtle. Even if the medical personnel saw it, they would only think that it was caused by a spasm. After reading the contents of the tablet, the killing intent on Knight and Lung's bodies receded, but their faces were a little twisted. Right now, they wanted nothing more than to drag Silen out of the hospital and give him a good whipping. Knight even purposely ran over to Silen's room to take a look. Fuck, there's nothing substantial at all. It was all prepared a long time ago. In the information on the tablet, Silen had only briefly explained that this matter had been arranged, and that they did not need to worry. Also, Silen Duance was also going to disappear from this world. The reason why he gave such an explanation was firstly because of trust. Silen had confidence in the trio. Secondly, if Silen did not say anything, these people would probably turn Seven Lights or even a couple of sectors into chaos. At the same time, at the research division, the Chief Mo Hong had been locked inside the workshop ever since he returned from the hospital. Whenever the others recalled Mo Hang's ugly expression and low pressure when he returned, they immediately swallowed their words. Everyone thought that Mo Hung was sad because his beloved disciple was assassinated, but that was not the case. Mo Hung was in a very bad mood, but not because he was sad, but because he was depressed. He knew that something like this would happen to Sillin a long time ago. Before Sillin went to participate in the integrated warfare tournament, the machine he assembled had a password on it. It was something that only a machine member would understand, but even if a machine member knew it, they would not understand the meaning of the password. This was because the password was arranged according to a person's habit, and different people would see different information. Therefore, unless one knew the sequence of the password, they would only see a bunch of garbled codes. From those passwords, Mo Hung learned of Sillin's plan, and he also knew that Sillin would leave just like this. Although Sillin promised that he would contact Mo Hung in the future, Mo Hung still felt suffocated in his heart. Now that Sillin had left, he could no longer boast openly. Kong Man, Hard, and the others felt that the assassination of Sillin was unreal. It was as if they still could not accept it. Just a moment ago, such a powerful and outstanding person was discussing the welcoming banquet with them. And in the next moment, he was gone just like that. To them, it must be said that it was a huge shock. Lung put up a bounty of 100 million to find the true culprit. Of course, this was just a cover. Otherwise, if something had really happened to Sillin, with the temperament of young Master Lung's Andryra family bloodline, the bounty would not be just 100 million. Since the investigation had not made any progress, Seven Lights announced to the public that it might be Blackthorn's doing. This statement was given by a Flan of the Duance family, so Seven Lights followed it. Moreover, this statement could reduce Seven Lights' responsibility to the minimum, so the higher-ups of Seven Lights were happy to see it. 20 days later, on a starship at Sector D, a brawny young man with brown hair and a simple and honest-looking body walked into a room with a backpack on his back. The person inside had been waiting for a long time already. "Long time no see, Captain," the young man said with a simple and honest smile. "Welcome back, Sillin." Chapter 81. There was another person in the room other than Shotten. It was a girl who looked to be around 6 or 7 years old. She was sucking a lollipop and was engrossed in a gunfight game. She ignored Sillin's entrance and kept her eyes glued to the screen. "The payment has been received. It looks like Aflon is very satisfied with this matter." Shotten flicked the card in his hand and said, Sillin Duance had already disappeared from this world. Not even Aflon would know what Sillin looked like right now. Aflon, who had obtained the position of heir, very generously gave out the payment. One portion was Sillin's, and the other belonged to the 6th team. The payment this time alone was enough to cover the daily expenses of the 6th Division for an entire year. It had been almost a year since Sillin accepted the mission. During this time, no one in the 6th Division knew of Sillin's existence or whereabouts except for a few individuals. It was only when the mission was over that Shotten told Yudi, Carrie, and the others about Sillin. This was because they had met Sillin for the first time, and they were also part of the Dia squad. They would continue to get along in the future. Who are you?" The little girl who was playing raised her head to look at Sillin after finishing a round. Her big sky blue eyes were filled with vigilance and curiosity. Sillin was also very curious. Shotten had actually brought this little girl with him. Could she be his illegitimate daughter? But it didn't look like it. Shotten smiled and pointed at Sillin, introducing him to the little girl. "This is Sillin." Then he pointed at the little girl and said to Sillin, "This is the new member who joined not long ago, Tang Chiochio." Before Sillin could be surprised by such a young new member, Tang Chiochio cried out, "Impossible! Sillin doesn't look like this." Sillin pulled over a chair and sat down in front of her. "I am Sillin. Do you have any objections?" "You're not. Sillin has light gray hair, and his eyes aren't like yours. They don't look alike, and Sillin is thinner than you," Tang Chiochio said with certainty. "I had plastic surgery." "You're talking nonsense." "I'm not talking nonsense." "You're just talking nonsense." "I'm not spouting nonsense." "What about me? What makes you think I'm not Sillin?" "Because I was the one who shot him," Tang Kikikyu roared angrily. Sillin was shocked and looked at Shotten. Shotten nodded. Sillin had always thought that the one who opened fire at Seven Lights Port would be Shotten, because Shotten had said that he would personally take action during their discussion. With the leader of Vanguard Division 6 personally taking action, it would be very difficult to track him down. Moreover, the incident was completed perfectly. Up until now, Seven Lights had yet to discover the suspect who fired the gun. But who would have thought that it would be this little girl who fired the gun? No wonder those people couldn't find the suspect. She was just an innocent and adorable little girl who was eating a lollipop in the crowd. Who would have thought that she would shoot someone? Chochio, he really is Sillen. He just changed his appearance, that's all. It's a mission. Shotten walked over and rubbed Tang Chochio's head and said. Tang Chochio scanned Sillen from head to toe before jumping off the chair and circling around Sillen twice. I don't feel like they're the same person at all. That's why I said he's an excellent hunter. Although Shotten didn't know how Sillen had turned from his previous appearance to his current appearance, and Shotten couldn't quite believe that Sillen had gone through plastic surgery on his entire body. These were his team member secrets. Who didn't have a trump card up their sleeves? That was why he wouldn't ask too many questions. As long as the person was capable and had a trustworthy character, the 6th team would welcome them. I'll be even better than him in the future. Tang Chochio returned to her seat and sat down. She unwrapped a lollipop and put it in her mouth before continuing to play the game. Shotten gave her a look and gestured for Sillen, said that they should talk in the adjacent hall. There are a couple of newbies other than you this time, and they're all from Diaz's squad. Speaking of which, you should know them. You've already met Ba Zong and Koi behind the smile on the Sector Championship platform. Ba Zong's original name is Ba Dao, and Koi behind the smile's original name is Xiao Shan. They were sent to higher education institutions because their ages met the requirements. We may be hunters, but we're also cultured hunters. The moment Shotten mentioned Ba Zong and Koi behind the smile, Sillen immediately knew that those two guys were pretty good. The other newbie who's also under Diaz is Tang Chochio. When he mentioned Tang Chochio, Shotten sighed heavily. She's from Sector V. Sector V was one of the more chaotic sectors among the 13 backward sectors. Because it was farther away from the other sectors that were more developed, it was ranked at the back of the 13 backward sectors. It was far worse than Sillen's home, Sector X. The livable planets were plagued by the flames of war all year round. And the situation there was even more complicated than that. The League of Stars' garrison at Sector V would not interfere, and they wouldn't act so early. At the very least, they would wait until the people they were almost done fighting before, sending out their troops to suppress them. Since the development of civilization, when the people of Sector V came into contact with these high-end civilizations, they would divide into many factions and occupy an advantageous position through war. The foreign forces would infiltrate and provide them with weapons and wealth. At the same time, the invading forces would buy manpower and expand their territory. Moreover, there were many children in that sector who were reduced to war slaves from a young age. The first thing they picked up was not a spoon, a doll, or a starship model, but a gun. The adults in the war zones would teach them how to use a gun and kill people. They would convince them that killing was the happiest thing in the world. There were many children who weren't even as tall as a gun when they killed their first person. Killing was to survive, and to them, it was like killing fish to eat. There wasn't much to it. Basically, the children of Sector V did not have the so-called innocence that belonged to that age. Instead, they had numb and empty eyes, and their lives might not even be as long as a G-rank genotype. This was especially true for girls. The slightly older teenage girls had to carry guns in a battle, and were used as tools for men to vent their lust. In that case, Tang Chochio should be one of them. Chochio looks like she's only 6 or 7, but she's actually 8 already. She looks thinner and weaker than the average child due to early malnutrition. We met her when we went to Sector V to hunt down a prey. Diaz said that she was the only child he had seen in Sector V who wasn't dyed black by the smoke of war. At the time, none of our companions believed him, because when we saw Tang Chochio, she was holding a gun and blowing up an adult's head expressionlessly. Shotten took out an electronic notebook and brought up a picture. This is Tang Chochio at the time. Sillen looked over. On the electronic notebook, there was a little girl with dry, messy hair and a face covered in dust. She was carrying an old rifle that was about the same length as her expressionlessly. The background was a street filled with blood type and violence, restlessness and noise. You know, Diaz may not be outstanding in other aspects, but he's a good judge of character. At the time, Diaz had tossed away his gun in front of Tang Qiuqiu and walked towards her with a kind smile. He signaled us not to follow, not to take out our guns, and it would be best if we didn't look in his direction. At the time, when we saw Qiuqiu pointing a gun at Diaz, if Diaz hadn't told us not to act rashly, we might have opened fire. At the time, we were so scared that we were drenched in sweat. When he said this, Shotten couldn't help but laugh. Diaz didn't pay attention to Qiuqiu's gun barrel. He walked in front of her and took out a few sugar balls he bought along the way to grind his teeth and passed them to her. At first, Qiuqiu's eyes were filled with caution and suspicion. Then Diaz picked up one of the sugar balls, peeled off the wrapper, and stuffed it into his mouth. He smacked his lips and chewed on it loudly. Perhaps it was the sweet smell of the fruit that attracted her. When Diaz peeled off the wrapper and passed it to her, she caught it and stuffed it into her mouth. After she stuffed the candy in her mouth, she smiled at Diaz. Shotten brought up another picture. Sillin looked over. The electronic notebook still showed that face covered in dust, but the cold gaze from before was gone. It was a very clean smile. At that moment, those eyes were as free as the sky. Chapter 82. Diaz had bought Tang Qiuqiu from Sector V. In reality, a war slave of Tang Qiuqiu's age was worth less than 1,000 galactic credits. It could be said to be extremely cheap, and a lot of people from other sectors would buy war slaves from there. Due to the environment, these war slaves were basically cannon fodder. They basically had no names in the war zone, so after she was bought, Diaz had asked her to change her name. And so, Tang Qiuqiu was born. Since everyone needed to complete a mission before they could officially join the team, Shotten had passed the assassination mission to Tang Qiuqiu after a series of tests and training. After all, Tang Qiuqiu's qualifications were much better than Shotten's. The team has been active in Sector T recently. Diaz's squad is hunting alien beasts. When you and Tang Qiuqiu arrive at the transit planet, you and Tang Qiuqiu will meet up with them. I'll return to the main starship directly. I have other matters to attend to over there. Shotten explained the following arrangements to Sillin. As the 6th Division's captain, Shotten was very busy. All right, I understand. The remuneration you receive belongs to you yourselves. The team will not ask for additional bonuses. Buy whatever you want. You can be considered a little rich now, Shotten said with a smile. It was true that Sillin had gotten a lot of money from Aflon for this mission. In total, it was almost 100 million galactic credits. This was something he and Shotten did not expect at first. Before they arrived at Sector T, Sillin and Tang Qiuqiu played a little gunfight since they had nothing to do. It had to be said that the kids who grew up in Sector V were different from the rest. Not only were they decisive when firing a gun, their judgment was also very accurate and accurate. Otherwise, Shotten wouldn't have let her be the shooter. As long as the target wasn't moving at high speed and was within her shooting range, Tang Qiuqiu could be said to be 100% accurate. After coming into contact with the 6th team, Tang Qiuqiu had met a lot of great shooters. She had been exposed to all kinds of gun models. At the same time, she had learned very quickly. She had mastered almost every type of gun as soon as she got a hold of it. Children at this age had a very strong learning ability. However, she seemed to learn things that she shouldn't have learned very quickly. F***CK? What the hell? Puff, Shotten, who was enjoying his tea, spat out a mouthful of tea. Sillin looked at Shotten speechlessly. This sentence coming from the mouth of an 8-year-old child was too shocking. Moreover, it was a girl. Who taught her this? However, the person who spoke didn't seem to realize it at all. He was still sucking on his lollipop and frowning at the screen. Ahem, Tang Qiuqiu, girls should be more refined. Shotten didn't know what to say. He had no experience in teaching children. Tang Qiuqiu was puzzled. Can I say this? Big brother, Xiao Shang often says this. Xiao Shang, you're asking for a beating. It's fine if you say it normally, but how dare you say such nonsense in front of a child? Shotten gritted his teeth. Sillin, When you see that be asterisk tch, Xiao Shang, punish him. Yes, sir. Shotten turned around and straightened his face. Tang Kukikiu, Xiao Shang and the others can say that, but you can't. It's not good for a girl to say that. Tang Kukikiu frowned. But it feels quite exciting. Excited my asterisk SS. Shotten almost cursed it out loud, but he retracted his words in a daze. A single mistake may cause everlasting sorrow. Xiao Shang, your sins have deepened yet again. Diaz's squad loved to act like hooligans the most. As the saying goes, a crooked stick will have a crooked shadow. If even Diaz behaved like that, then there was no need to even mention the rest of the squad. Carrie and Xiao Shang would always spout nonsense whenever they ran into each other. However, Tang Kukikiu chose to stay in Diaz's squad. She refused to go to any other squad at all. Such a beautiful flower wasn't dyed black in the smoke of Sector V, but died in the 6th squad instead. Shotten dared not imagine what kind of person Tang Xiuqiu would become in an environment where hooligan words flew everywhere. Shotten said seriously, Tang Kukiu, it's not beautiful for a girl to say such things. However, Tang Xiuqiu's frown grew deeper. Her expression clearly said, what is beautiful? Why must it be beautiful? Both Shotten and Sillin fell silent. That's right. In Sector V, everything other than life and death were fleeting clouds. Beauty and ugliness were all equal after a single shot. Ahem, Tang Xiuqiu, are you unhappy about losing? Shotten changed the topic and stopped dwelling on that sentence. The next time he saw Xiao Shang, he was definitely going to give that kid a good beating. The moment the topic was brought up, Tang Xiuqiu pouted, I lost by 1 point. Tang Xiuqiu did not have this many expressions when she was still at Sector V, but after she came into contact with the 6th squad, her expressions gradually became richer. When she saw some children pouting when they were dissatisfied or conflicted on TV or in magazines, she followed suit. Diaz even recorded a video of Tang Xiuqiu practicing pouting in front of a mirror. It was very funny, but also somewhat sour. You lost by 10 points at the beginning, but haven't you been losing less and less in the last few rounds? You've improved a lot. Although Sillin had gone easy on her, he could clearly feel Tang Xiuqiu's improvement. Her absorption ability was too strong, and her adjustment speed was too fast. Tang Xiuqiu did not speak. She bit down on the lollipop as fiercely as if it was Sillin, crunching loudly. One more round. Tang Xiuqiu rolled up her sleeves and prepared for battle. We'll talk about it next time. We still need to find the lieutenant commander and the others after we reach Sector V. All right, let's go find Brother Diaz first. We'll compete to see who can hunt more alien beasts then. Maybe we'll catch up and hunt more than Carrie and the others. Yeah, and there's that slut brother Xiao Shang too. Shotten, who was walking out of the door, stumbled and nearly fell to the ground. As expected, words should not be spoken carelessly. Tang Xiuqiu, slut isn't a good word. Girls shouldn't say it carelessly. Seeing Sillin and Shotten's serious expressions, Tang Xiuqiu continued to pout. Fine, I won't say it. After entering Sector T's transit planet, TC-100, Shotten separated from them. Someone was to receive him back to the main starship, while Sillin and Tang Xiuqiu bought a flight to planet TH-001. Now that Sillin and Tang Xiuqiu both had new IDs, it was not difficult for Vanguard to obtain such legal IDs. The flight was still more than half a day away, so Sillin brought Tang Xiuqiu to eat a good meal first. Tang Xiuqiu's appetite was larger than the average child of her age, but she was not a picky eater. Moreover, she would try her best to finish everything she ordered. After experiencing true hunger, Tang Xiuqiu did not like to waste food. Sillin looked at the time. There was still more than 5 hours before the flight. He brought up the surrounding map and looked at it. Then he said to Tang Xiuqiu, who was drinking fruit juice, Xiuqiu, there's still 5 hours before the flight departs. How about we go for a walk? There's an amusement park nearby. We'll be done after a while, so we don't have to sit here and do nothing. Tang Xiuqiu's eyes lit up the moment she heard amusement park. She had only seen it on television and magazines, and had never experienced it herself. Seeing the children in the video seemed to be having a good time, Tang Xiuqiu was tempted as well. All right, let's go to the amusement park. Tang Xiuqiu carried a glass of fruit juice out of the restaurant with Sillin and took a taxi to the amusement park. Chapter 83. I want that. Tang Xiuqiu looked excitedly at the variety of candies displayed on the counter. These candies were exquisitely packaged, and the cute boxes were more attractive to children than the candies inside. But why was she referring to the poop green dinosaur and not the pink bunny dolls beside it? However, this was a vending machine, and there was no human salesperson. If there was, the salesperson would definitely look at Tang Xiuqiu strangely. Since Tang Xiuqiu liked it, Sillin wouldn't say much. After swiping the card, he took out the poop green dinosaur candy box and handed it to Tang Xiuqiu. Tang Xiuqiu took it excitedly. Why did you choose this? The little animal boxes beside it are cuter. Sillin asked. Because it looks like a Miantuan. Tang Xiuqiu smiled happily. The Miantuan was Yudi's weird mutated chameleon. After playing around for a while, an ordinary child would have been tired to the point of collapsing. However, although Tang Xiuqiu looked thin and weak, her physical strength was extraordinary. After 3 hours, she was still full of energy. Sillin let Tang Xiuqiu ride on his neck, so that Tang Xiuqiu could see the scene in the distance. Now, Sillin's body was obviously much thicker, and with Tang Xiuqiu's small figure, it looked a little warm. Oh, what's that? Tang Xiuqiu rode on Sillin's neck, one hand holding Sillin's head and the other pointing in a direction. Sillin looked in the direction she was pointing, and there was a big cotton candy balloon floating there. That's cotton candy. In fact, the word cotton candy was floating next to the balloon, but Tang Xiuqiu only recognized the word candy. When she was at Sector V, she was basically illiterate, and even the language she spoke was the native language of that place. She had very little contact with the League of Stars Common Language, and although she had learned some after joining the 6th team, she wasn't familiar with it. That was why Tang Xiuqiu would always memorize what others said and enrich her own language. The marshmallow seller was surrounded by many children. They were drooling as they looked at the cute marshmallows on display. They pulled the adults beside them and asked to buy them. Which one do you like? Sillin asked. Since Tang Kukikiu was riding on Sillin's neck, she could see all the marshmallows on his neck clearly. That! Tang Kukikiu pointed at a cotton candy that was making a funny face. Boss, I want the one that makes faces. Also, make one custom-made just like us. All right, but it will take about 10 minutes. All right. Sillin paid the money first. These marshmallows were all freshly made and sold like hotcakes. They were bought almost immediately after they were made, and some of the people waiting had chosen to have them custom-made. At first, Sillin wanted to take Tang Xiuqiu to other places for a spin, but Tang Xiuqiu didn't want to leave. She just wanted to watch how the man made the marshmallows. When the surrounding children saw Tang Xiuqiu riding on Sillin's neck, they pestered the adults beside them to do the same. Tang Xiuqiu glanced at them and smiled brightly. When they returned to the airport, Tang Xiuqiu chewed on the marshmallows all the way. Sillin carried a big bag full of marshmallows in his hand. Of course, there was also a bottle of tooth protector. Otherwise, Tang Xiuqiu's teeth would go bad if she ate the way she did. It didn't take long for Tang Xiuqiu to fall asleep on the TC-100 to T-H001 flight. She had too much fun today, and she was a child after all. She needed rest. When she fell asleep, there was still a smile on the corner of Tang Xiuqiu's lips, and she was hugging the dinosaur candy box in her arms. Sillin pressed a button next to the seat, and a panel popped out. Then, Sillin began flipping through the magazines on it. There were a lot of things reported in the electronic magazines recently, and Sillin saw things about him while he was flipping through them. Assassination of the Duance family's heir's son, Seven Lights genius, assassinated. Many of the details in the magazines had been diluted. They did not mention Seven Lights' negative influence, and many of them even absolved Seven Lights of responsibility. This meant that the higher-ups of Seven Lights had done their best. The title alone was enough to shock anyone, but there wasn't much description. There wasn't even an image or video, and it was heavily diluted. Even Sillin's name did not appear, and only replaced it with the Duance family's heir's son. It looked like Aflon had taken care of it himself. This matter was also linked to another matter regarding the Duance family. Aflon had used iron and blood to deal with the people inside the family, and blamed the assassination on them as well. He used the assassination as an excuse to make people think that Aflon was standing on the side of reason. After they arrived at planet TH-001, they would have to change to another passenger ship if they wanted to meet up with Diaz and the others. There were many small passenger ships docked at planet TH-001's main port, and they were all heading to different planets. In Sector T, planets that began with H were all hunting planets. These planets were not habitable planets for humans and were basically the world of beasts. Hunters liked to come here to hunt and then transport their prey to be sold to buyers. The beasts on the planets in this region were all very special, and most of them were treasures from head to toe. Their skin, fur, horns, teeth, bones, and so on were all very popular outside. However, in order to ensure that the alien beasts in this region could continue to survive, the League of Stars had made a pact that forbade the use of weapons of mass destruction, radioactive weapons, or the destruction of the environment on these planets. Sometimes, hunters would be fined if they accidentally used some slightly heavier weapons and destroyed a certain mountain or a certain forest. In serious cases, they might even be sent to prison. Diaz's squad's hunting spot was at planet TH-036. When Silin and Tang Xiuqiu arrived there on the passenger starship, they immediately saw the familiar starship docked to the spaceport. The big dagger symbol on the starship was very eye-catching, and it was also a reminder to those rascals that they would have to think twice before trying anything funny. At this time, the squad starship should only have the staff who stayed behind to guard it, and the core members should have gone hunting on the planet. But coincidentally, a spaceplane flew out of the planet at this time and entered the starship. When Silin and Tang Xiuqiu entered the starship, they saw Carrie commanding the people to unload things from the spaceplane. Xiuqiu, you're back. Carrie walked over. He was going to hug Xiuqiu, but he gave up in the end when he saw the red and blue alien blood on his body. Seeing Carrie looking at him with a puzzled expression, Silin smiled and said, "Long time no see, Carrie." Carrie grew even more puzzled. He was sure that he had never seen this person in front of him before. This person looked stupid. Tang Xiuqiu giggled. It looked like she wasn't the only one who couldn't recognize him. He's Big Brother Silin. The fact that Tang Xiuqiu was able to add the word Big Brother behind Silin's name meant that she had now acknowledged Silin. Previously, she would just call him Silin or not. Silin. Carrie's jaw dropped as he looked around. Then he said in realization, "No wonder the vice captain said you've changed a layer of skin." Chapter 84. The spaceplane Carrie drove over was loaded with the results of their hunts. The skin and bones of various exotic beasts had already been processed and sorted. The starship's logistics staff would deal with these things further. After the goods were unloaded, Carrie drove the spaceplane back to the planet. Silin and Tang Xiuqiu followed along. Tang Xiuqiu had been holding back for a long time. She had been playing with her gun on the spaceplane. Tang Xiuqiu's gun had been modified. The body of the gun was lighter, and the recoil wasn't as strong as the gun she used in the past. However, its lethality was much stronger than the old rifle she used in the past. There were some bullets on the side. Laser-type firearms would burn the skin and fur of exotic beasts, and they wouldn't be sold for a high price. Laser-type firearms weren't very safe in dry forests and could easily attract the attention of exotic beasts. Therefore, hunters preferred to use modified bullets. Some of these bullets were specially used to capture living creatures. The bullets would be filled with drugs, and after hitting the prey, the bullets would dissolve in the blood and release the drugs. Taking advantage of this time, Carrie took out thermal clothes for Silin and Tang Xiuqiu to wear and explained the situation on the ground. Although there were many species on this planet, the environmental conditions weren't that optimistic for humans. The temperature was below zero all year round. Most of the exotic beasts on this planet had thick fur or scales, and they were very fierce. Some of the seemingly harmless animals were actually even more ferocious. Normally, beasts in cold and warm regions tend to be larger in size. The cats here are about the size of leopards in other sectors. Carrie said blabbermouthed. Tang Xiuqiu tilted her head. How do you know they're cats and not leopards? One night, I heard them meowing. Scylla didn't wait for Carrie to finish and immediately covered Carrie's mouth. It was better not to use that word in front of child. Carrie didn't understand at first why Scylla wanted to stop him from speaking. Wasn't it just cats meowing in heat? But when he looked at Tang Chiochio's inquisitive gaze, he immediately understood. Yes, a leopard's cry is different from a cat's, Carrie said with a serious expression. Tang Chiochio thought for a moment. That made sense and didn't continue on this topic. Scylla and Carrie looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. Things were really different with a child in the team. They still had to keep their mouths shut in front of her. The space plane landed in front of a 3-story building. A similar space plane was parked around the building, and someone was loading goods into it. This time, it was basically filled with living creatures stored in specially made cages. Because they had been injected with medicine, those exotic beasts were all lying in the cages dispiritedly. Carrie pointed at an animal that looked like a squirrel but was 3 times bigger than an ordinary squirrel and said, "Look, aren't they cute like this? Furry." Girls loved this kind of fur the most, especially when they looked into his black eyes. It was easy to feel pity for him. Seeing Tang Chiochio looking at the animals, Carrie went over and asked, "Do you like them?" Seeing that Tang Chiochio was staring at the animals, Carrie moved closer and asked, "Do you like them? There's a type with white fur that's even cuter. Many rich ladies like them." Tang Chiochio frowned. "What's the point of keeping them?" Carrie was about to say that they were being kept for fun, but he swallowed his words back down. If he said that, Tang Chiochio would definitely reply, "Then I'll sell them for money. The money I get from selling them can buy a lot of candies." If he said that, Tang Chiochio would definitely reply, "Then let's sell them for money. The money we earn from selling them can buy a lot of candy." This kind of animal would only be lethal when it was wild, and once it was domesticated, it would basically become a soft egg. Those rich ladies were just keeping them for fun. When they had nothing to do, they would touch, hug, and tease them purely for fun. In terms of intelligence, these animals were far inferior to Yudi's mischievous Miantuan lizard. Seeing that Carrie was speechless, Scylla patted Tang Chiochio. "Get ready, let's go hunting." Seeing that Carrie was speechless, Scylla patted Tang Chiochio and said, "Get ready, let's go hunting." "Okay, let's go hunting." At the mention of hunting, Tang Chiochio didn't care whether Carrie answered the question and followed Scylla out. "Hey, wait, I'll go with you." As soon as Scylla came out, he saw Beaver calculating something with his fingers. "What's the matter, Beaver? What happened?" Beaver looked up. "Yo, Scylla, you're back." Carrie was depressed, and Tang Chiochio was disappointed. Beaver could actually recognize Scylla. Actually, Beaver had seen the image of Scylla's new face sent by Shotten, so he wasn't as surprised as Carrie. His surprise period was over. "It's nothing. I'm looking for other places with more exotic beasts." "Oh, are you guys going to look for the vice captain? He's in this position." Beaver brought up the image and pointed at one of the spots. After transferring the map, Scylla, Tang Chiochio, and Carrie set off. The 3 of them took a small airship and headed in Dias's direction. Looking down from the airship, the planet's unique, cold-resistant coniferous forest belt and some evergreen trees were everywhere. From time to time, they could see a black shadow flashing through the forest, but it was not the prey they were looking for, so they did not bother with it. Dias was currently tracking a group of polar bears, whose fur could be sold for a large sum of money. In this era of high-tech materials, people's pursuit of such primitive fur was even crazier. The higher one stood at the top of the pyramid, the more they liked these things. In the eyes of the noble women, the rare primitive animal fur was equal to precious jewelry, or even more so. The airship's radar showed the creatures in the surroundings, but Scylla didn't completely rely on the radar. He used his eyes to see and ears to listen. This was his habit. Caw, 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 caw. A flock of birds flew in the forest, their cries a little frightening. From the radar's information, there were only a few kittens and wolves. Carrie didn't care about them, so he didn't care. Hunting them was purely a waste of bullets. Scylla's ears twitched, and he suddenly said, "Carrie, stop." "What's wrong?" asked Carrie as he slowed down the airship. Scylla took his backpack and said, I'll go down and take a look. You guys go meet up with the vice captain first. Hey, what's so good about those things? This is just the periphery of the forest. There's nothing good. It's okay. I'll just go take a look. You guys go first. Scylla took out a hoverboard from the airship's equipment compartment and unfolded it. I'll catch up with you guys later. After saying that, Scylla stepped on the hoverboard and flew down the airship. This kid is really... Carrie shook his head and sped up the airship and left. This kid is really... Licking her lollipop, Tang Chocho asked, "Where's Brother Scylla going? Isn't there no good prey over there?" "Who knows? That guy probably had a seizure," Carrie said without thinking. "What's a seizure?" After a pause, Carrie answered cautiously, "It's a kind of cramp." Chapter 85. After Scylla landed on the hoverboard in the forest, he put away the hoverboard and put it back into his backpack. He took out a bottle of medicine and sprayed it on his body, causing his aura to be almost the same as his surroundings. Then he stuffed his backpack into a crack in the rocks. He snuck towards the direction of the surprised flock of birds. If Carrie had done a sound spectrum analysis with an instrument at the time, he would have discovered a strange waveline. There was a sound that was different from the cries of animals, mixed in with the cries of the birds and cats. It sounded a little like a machine, but it was also different from a machine. It was exactly because of this that Scylla wanted to investigate. He couldn't shake the feeling that he would discover something. Scylla slowly groped his way forward. The animals here were different from humans. Their hearing was very sensitive, so Scylla had to be even more careful. If he wanted to know the truth, then he must conceal himself. Although he had sprayed himself with the medicine, Scylla had purposely chosen a position against the wind just to be on the safe side. This way, even his aura would not be easily discovered by the animals upwind. The leaves rustled as the wind blew past them, and some needles fell from time to time. It was just a tiny sound, but it was enough to help Scylla conceal the sound of his sneak attack. Gradually, Scylla could hear a few low growls from the other side and the warning whines of the cats. Further ahead, Scylla saw the situation on the other side. There were 6 wolves, 3 cats, for cats, and a kitten surrounded by 3 big cats. The kitten looked dispirited, its eyes were closed, and its breathing was relatively weak. It was just as Carrie had said. The cats here looked like leopards, and the kitten's size could be considered normal in comparison. The contrast of being surrounded by 3 big cats was too obvious. The cats were big, but the wolves were even bigger. Have you ever seen a wolf the size of a bear? In any case, this was the first time Scylla had seen one. However, he had seen a rat the size of a bear back at 7 Lights, so he was not surprised here. But what puzzled Scylla was why the 6 wolves would hesitate in front of the 3 cats and ignore the kitten. Logically speaking, be it in terms of size or number, the wolves had the absolute advantage. They shouldn't be hesitating like this, as if they wanted to charge but were afraid of something. Something was wrong. Scylla held his breath as he watched the scene. He had a nagging feeling that something was wrong, but he could not find anything out of the ordinary. There was no mechanical activity, no energy fluctuations, only these few animals. One of the wolves growled in a low voice and took a step forward. The fur on the 3 big cats' bodies immediately stood up. Before, it was only the fur on their backs that stood up, but now, they felt like their whole bodies were in a state of tension. Their tails were straightened, and because of the fur standing up, they looked a lot bigger. At the same time, the 3 big cats took half a step back, getting closer to the kitten in the circle. The wolf did not continue to move forward. Instead, it anxiously circled the area, its claws scratching at the ground that was frozen hard due to the low temperature like tofu. Perhaps it was because of the wolf's low growl and the sound of its claws scratching the ground, or the 3 big cats whimpering because of nervousness. The kitten surrounding them struggled to open their eyes. The kitten was leaning against a rock that was not much bigger than it was. There were some primitive ferns in the cracks of the rock. When it opened its eyes, the first thing it did was not look at the big cats or the 6 wolves, but at the few small ferns in the cracks of the rock. The kitten opened its mouth, revealing its fine teeth. It was indeed no different from an ordinary cat, unlike the big cats, whose teeth were ferocious. It bit at the leaves that stretched out from the cracks of the rock, clawed its paws, closed its eyes, and dropped its head. It continued its original appearance, as if biting the leaves had consumed a lot of energy. Scylla narrowed his eyes. Something was wrong. Just now, when the kitten opened its mouth, the 6 wolves showed obvious signs of cowering. The wolf in the front even retreated to stand with its companions, as if that was the only way it could regain some courage and peace of mind. Previously, he thought that the 3 big cats had surrounded the kitten to protect it, but the truth was that the 3 big cats were afraid. Since they were so close to the kitten, what the 6 wolves were really afraid of was not the 3 big cats, but the sickly kitten lying there, right? Scylla continued to observe for a while, but there was still no progress on the other side. It cannot go on like this. In order to verify the speculation in his heart, Scylla turned his hand, took out a needle, and shot it at one of the wolves. The conflict had to be intensified in order to better resolve this conflict. While they were confronting each other, the wolf that was shot in the butt suddenly jumped up and howled. It wasn't because of pain, but because of fear. The wolf's fur was very thick, and Scylla's needle did not penetrate much of it. However, the highly nervous wolf reflexively jumped a step forward when it felt the pain on its butt. The other wolves behind it seemed to have received the encouragement and jumped forward as well. When the 3 big cats saw that they had actually rushed forward, they also decided to fight to the death. The situation instantly became chaotic, and because of this, Scylla saw a shocking scene. The kitten that was originally lying on the ground, making people feel that it was exhaling more than it was inhaling, suddenly had its head expand, and it was even bigger than the wolf's body. The originally gray fur contracted and changed, and its skin revealed a metallic luster. At this moment, it did not look like an animal at all, but more like a mechanical body. No, it should be a combination of a mechanical body and an animal, because except for this strange mechanical head, its torso and limbs still maintained the original shape of the kitten. The swollen mechanical cat head opened its mouth and swallowed the nearest wolf in one gulp. Then, the mechanical cat head slowly changed back to its original state, and the metallic luster disappeared. Its fur reappeared, and it returned to its original appearance, lying there half dead and half alive, continuing to be weak. When the kitten transformed, the 6 wolves wanted to immediately escape from the battle, but the one closest to it didn't have time to escape and suffered a disaster. The other 5 fled 50 meters away with their tails between their legs, panting heavily. Scylla was speechless. Damn, this guy is King Kong. Although it is not pure, that appearance just now is definitely a mechanical body. Cyborg life form? Scylla had read some articles in electronic journals with high contribution points. Some people mentioned cyborg life forms, but these life forms were very unstable and could only survive for a very short period of time. Many researchers had thought of creating such a cyborg life form, but the results were not as good as expected. Apart from a shortcoming of a naturally formed cyborg life form, the transition between carbon-based life form and mechanical life form was almost perfect. Artificial cyborg life forms could not achieve such perfection, and they were either above or below the balance point. Someone had once speculated on the possible cause of cyborg formation in one of Gal's 2 giant publications, Code, but the explanation was very vague. Perhaps it was because Scylla's reading clearance wasn't high enough, and he wasn't able to access the true research secrets. Researchers described this cyborg life form as a miracle in the universe. The core of this life form was a certain matter that was accidentally formed in the universe. This matter could not be replicated, and when it floated to a planet with life, this matter would capture the genetic information of a certain creature. Then, using this genetic information as a template, it would form a similar life form, which was what they called cyborg life form. The universe was a place that produced all kinds of miracles. Scylla didn't know how it was formed, and he didn't know if the researchers had created a perfect cyborg. But the one in front of him was definitely a cyborg that had transformed into a perfect cyborg. Chapter 86. Now, it had returned to what Scylla had seen at the beginning, except that there was one less wolf. The kitten was still lying there dispiritedly, its tail barely moving. However, Celine did not dare to underestimate this fellow now. He was not confident that he could win against a half-living creature that could swallow a wolf in one gulp. But was his semi-living cat really sick, or was it just pretending to be sick? If it was really sick, the speed at which it swallowed the wolf was simply lightning fast. If it were not for Silen's good eyesight, which allowed him to capture such a fast movement and some of the details, the scene just now would have looked like a gray shadow flashing and the wolf disappeared. If it was pretending to be sick, it really did look sick and extremely dispirited. If it was in good spirits, these wolves would probably be buried in its stomach. In order to figure out the cat's situation, Silen decided to wait and see. Knowing that the cat was a semi-living creature, Silen did not dare to act rashly. But reality did not go as Silen wished. The kitten, who was lying down dispiritedly, suddenly raised its head and opened its eyes. Unlike its previous confused look, its eyes were wide open, and its pupils had shrunk into a long and narrow line. And the place it was looking at was the direction where Silen was. It seemed to be very excited. This time, it was not just its head, but its whole body began to change, distort, and transform. But it was only in the process of transformation, and it could not be fixed. Its fur and metal luster alternated between mechanical changes, and its body size was sometimes small and sometimes big. It was extremely strange, seeing the semi-mechanical cat stand up with its trembling limbs. But it could not take a step. Silen now believed that this guy was indeed weak. Perhaps it was as the researchers said, naturally formed semi-mechanical life forms could not have a long life. They were not stable enough, and this cat was very obvious. It could smoothly transform between mechanical and carbon-based life forms, but now it could not stabilize even one of them. Previously, this cat had maintained its carbon-based life form because its carbon-based body consumed less energy and lasted longer than a mechanical body. As soon as they saw the cat in such a state, the remaining 5 wolves immediately ran away. The strange cat gave them a very dangerous feeling. In addition to the 5 wolves, the 3 big cats also retreated while trembling. After seeing the wolves leave, they also ran away, leaving the cat that could change its shape without a fixed shape alone. Silen did not move. In that instant, he suddenly had a very familiar feeling. The chip in his body was excited again. At the same time, he felt that something was about to break out of the cocoon. Silen looked at the leaf pattern on Jenya's finger. There was something moving restlessly inside. It was that white ball. The cyborg cat stared straight at Silen, who was 100 meters away. It lifted its leg with difficulty, and its body swayed. After stabilizing itself, it continued to move in Silen's direction. With every step the cyborg cat took, Silen could feel that the white ball's restlessness became more intense. Surprisingly, the more the cyborg cat moved, the more energetic it seemed. Silen could just pull out his gun and shoot it, but his intuition told him not to. If he did, he would definitely be the one to die. Like 2 magnets attracting each other, Silen's left hand was already raised uncontrollably. There was a domineering force on his left thumb that was pulling him in that direction. Silen gritted his teeth and stabilized his body, but the force was too strong. Silen's feet scraped against the ground as he was pulled in that direction. As if dissatisfied with this state, the leaf pattern on Silen's left thumb began to twist in a spiral, forcibly tearing this subspace apart. The white ball flew out from inside, flew directly toward the cyborg cat, and then disappeared into its body. There was no dazzling white light, nor was there a loud explosion. There was only the cyborg cat lying there, transforming. However, Silen knew that this was not all. Because of the chip, he felt that something was wrong. The electromagnetic waves and charged particles around him were all changing. At the same time, all the communication equipment on planet TH-036 was cut off. All the power transmission networks were also paralyzed. Even the solar panels could not be used. Diaz was planning a strategy to hunt the polar bears, but he found that his communicator had suddenly lost signal. Strangely, the polar bears that were roaring arrogantly on the hillside earlier were now lying on the ground, trembling. Diaz and the others also felt a little uncomfortable. It was as if their minds were being disturbed by invisible sound waves. However, all the instruments could not be used, so there was no way to find out the reason. The satellites and aircrafts outside Planet T, H036, were also affected to some extent. The satellites could not send signals or monitor the ground, and the magnetic and ray analysis instruments could not be used. They could not contact the ground or other planets. Before this, no high-energy particles, rays, or magnetic field abnormalities have been detected at all. Some people said that it might be a stellar flare, but Planet T, H036, was relatively far from the star it was orbiting. Otherwise, the temperature would not be so low. There were many planets closer to Planet T, H036, but they had never heard of such a thing happening. Of course, it was also possible that the same thing was happening now, but the communication was disrupted before they could say anything about it. No matter what, at this stage, they had to analyze how long this abnormality would last. Only then could they come up with countermeasures. However, without some of the analysis instruments, it was not very possible to get an answer in a short period of time. In the forest on the ground, Sillin looked at the cyborg that was still lying on the ground, unable to stabilize. He did not go closer to take a look. He did not have the confidence to block a blow from such a powerful life form, even if he was in a solidified state. After about an hour, the cyborg cat's form gradually stabilized. It was still a small cat, but looked full of energy. Unlike the previous dispirited state, its gray fur was also bright, reflecting light under the natural light. When the cyborg cat stabilized, the communication equipment on the planet also recovered and began to operate normally. The cat looked up at Sillin. There was no malice in its eyes, but Sillin would not let his guard down because of this. He maintained a state of vigilance. As long as this fellow made the slightest movement, Sillin would definitely escape immediately. What a joke. Trying to fight against such a cyborg life form? Was he looking for SH*T? When the cat was within 50 meters of him, Sillin warned, "If you go any further, I'll kill you." Usually, when Sillin really wanted to shoot, he would not say such nonsense. He just wanted to remind the cat to keep its distance, but he was not sure if it would understand. Hearing Sillin's words, the Hui mouse stopped and squatted on the ground. It pulled its ears back and revealed a very disdainful look. What a bad temper. Sillin. It spoke. F***, it really spoke. Chapter 87. Sillin stared at the cat that was looking at him with disdain. He really did not remember reading about cyborg life forms that could speak. However, it could also be because he had not come into contact with the real core content of the research. In any case, this kind of life form was really amazing. I didn't expect you to be able to speak. I learned it more than 100 years ago. The cat raised its hand, raised its paw, and pointed in a direction. I remember there weren't that many buildings back then. There was only one landing spot on the entire planet. This planet was allowed to be open to hunting by the League of Stars more than 100 years ago. At that time, there were indeed not many human buildings. The direction that the cat's paw was pointing at was where their aircraft had landed. I didn't expect you to live for so long, Sillin lamented. Of course. Although I don't know how long I can live, it feels like I haven't grown much after all these years. Hui Mao was very dissatisfied that Sillin doubted its lifespan. Then what happened to you just now? Was that sickly and weak state that you were in? Was it an illusion? Sillin said with disdain. There will always be a period of time, every 10 years or so. During that period, I will become weak and unstable. These two states are very difficult to control, and I will also emit an electromagnetic wave that will attract many hostile species to attack me. Those wolves just now are one of them. Sillin suddenly understood. So that was it. They were unstable, but that did not mean that their lifespan was short. The short lifespan that the researchers mentioned was actually when they were periodically weak. If they attracted a stronger species to attack them, they would definitely die. The cat was still talking to itself. Before, I didn't understand why I would emit that kind of electromagnetic wave uncontrollably, but now I know that it's to attract that white ball. I don't know what it is, but I know that the white ball is useful to me. It can stabilize this chaotic and unstable state. Sillin could not feel the existence of the white ball anymore. It seemed that the coincidental formation of cyborg life forms also included the white ball. Cyborg life forms that did not fuse with the white ball could change between the two states perfectly, but they would not be able to maintain a stable state. I feel like you and I are the same kind. The cat looked at Cylin. When it came to this world, it knew that it was different from the living beings around it. But now, Cylin gave it a very strange feeling, an inexplicable sense of familiarity. I'm a normal carbon-based life form. A pure human, pure, Cylin affirmed. I know you're human, so I'm just saying it feels like. Sai, why don't you follow me? Now that I'm stable, I won't be as weak as before. I'm standing at the top of this planet. Not interested. Cylin walked back. He'd better get his bag and look for Dias and the others. Hey, don't go. Do you want me to follow you? The cat ran behind Celine eagerly. Cylin stopped and looked at the cat. This time, he didn't ask it to stop and let the cat walk in front of him. You want to leave? Yes, I'm tired of staying here. I want to go out and broaden my horizons. You can go find other people. There are many people who come here to hunt, or you can sneak into one of the spaceships and go on a free vacation. No. The cat shook its head vigorously. They're not reliable. Either they're too weak or their character is bad. Cylin squatted down and looked at the gray cat in front of him seriously. Speaking of which, you did remind me of something. What? I went through a lot of trouble to get that white ball. If I sold it to those crazy researchers, I might be able to get a few $100 million, but you took it from me. No matter what, you have to compensate me. You can follow me, but you have to pay your debt. Pay my debt. Yes. Cylin took out a knife and scratched some numbers on the ground. You know the polar bears on this planet, right? The kind that can sell for about 10,000 galactic credits each. If the money you owe me is converted into polar bears, it'll be no less than 10,000. Of course, some exotic beasts are more valuable. Some are worth more than 1 million each. That way, you'll save more effort. At this point, Cylin paused and looked suspiciously at the cat in front of him, who was staring at the ground and listening to him. Of course, maybe you can't deal with that kind of exotic beast. Can't deal with it? It raised its claws. I'll prove it to you. Let me tell you, I've never seen a beast that could withstand 2 of my claws. If it's just a show of swallowing a wolf, then forget it. That's just to show that you have a big appetite. That'll cost me more money. The cat snorted through its nose and looked at its surroundings. Then it swept its gaze across Cylin once before raising its paw and pointing at its own head. Take out your gun and point it at me. Cylin didn't say much. A cyborg should be very powerful. Who knows, it might really be able to carry guns and block cannons. Bang! A gunshot. The cat was sent flying with a single shot. A gray shadow flew far away. Cylin was speechless. Was this proof? But soon, the gray cat ran over and spat the bullet out of its mouth. The bullet was intact, and the medicine inside did not leak out. The most surprising thing was that Cylin had aimed at the cat's forehead and not its mouth when he fired. Right now, the cat's head was perfectly fine, and there was not a single change to it. The bullet, however, had come out of its mouth unscathed. Moreover, this kind of bullet was specially made to deal with large white bears. One shot could break their skin. He didn't expect this guy to be able to withstand it. How is it? Not bad, right? Queen said proudly. You're not embarrassed to be shot away. It wouldn't have happened if I changed forms. Cylin put away the gun and asked curiously, how did you change into these 2 forms? Even the elements changed. A cyborg was a carbon-based life form when it was in biological form, and its elemental composition was no different from that of a normal living being. However, its elemental composition would change when it transformed into a mechanical form. Cylin had never seen a metal like this, even though he had worked with Mo Hung for a long time. I don't know. I was born with it. I can easily change elements. It continued to be proud. Let me see it turn into gold. Don't you know what a directional change is? Huimao looked like he was teaching. He stretched out his paw and drew a circle on the ground. This is the elemental composition of my current form. He drew another circle. This is the elemental composition of another form. Then he marked a 2-way arrow between the 2 circles. This is the so-called directional change. Cylin said disappointedly, so you can't turn into gold. Huimao's ears pulled back. He was depressed. He suddenly felt that he was being looked down upon. Forget it. Just make do. Follow me and slowly pay off your debt. At least you might encounter something similar to that white ball. You can perfect yourself, and you won't be sold to a research lab to be dissected by those crazy researchers. The gray cat was about to refute Silen's earlier words, but it immediately quieted down when it heard Silen's last sentence. Actually, it wasn't a bad idea. It was just a few 100 million geo credits and a couple of valuable alien beasts. Not long after, Huimao realized that he was too naive. Chapter 88. Silen took out a stack of dark gold items from his bag and started to write. Huimao lay at the side and watched, its tail swaying here and there. It knew the common language of the League of Stars, and the dark gold stack clearly said receipt. That was why Huimao was very disdainful when Silen took out this item. It wasn't going to deny it at all. It's just a few 100 million. Is there a need to act like this? What's your name? Silen asked. There's no need to write Huimao on the receipt, is there? Hubeilu. What? Hubeilu is the native language of this sector. It's the first language I came into contact with. Hubeilu means overlord. There were originally no humans on this planet, and the first humans to come here were from Sector T itself. That was why this was the first language Huimao learned. Later on, people from other sectors also came here, and in the end, everyone used the common language of the League of Stars. Therefore, Huimao learned the common language later on. Silen curled his lips when he heard this. Overlord, what cocky fart. I've only heard of tigers possessing the aura of a king, but I've never seen a cat with the air of a king. Here, it's done. Take a look and see if there's anything wrong with it. If there's nothing wrong with it, just sign your name or a palm print. Silen passed the written item to Huimao. Huimao glanced at the number Silen wrote. It was 500 million, but it didn't think much of it. Without looking further, it raised its paw and pressed a palm print on the paper. All right. 2 copies, one for you and one for me, so that no one will go back on their word. Silen passed one to Huimao, but Huimao ate it in one gulp. He stood up, stuck out his butt, stretched his back, and shook his fur. Then, Huimao said, we could go now, right? Wait, there's something I need to tell you. Silen put away the receipt and looked at Huimao seriously. What? Huimao asked lazily. I'm now a member of a hunter group. If you want to follow me, you will not be following me as a member of the hunter group, but as the debtor. In short, I am the creditor, and you are the slave. Debt slave? It's so awful. The gray cat flicked its ears and said, Then let's make a pet. It'll help us conceal our identities. Pet? I'm a dignified. Then we'll be debt slaves? I'll still be a pet. But let's make this clear. Once I pay off my debt, I won't be a pet or a debt slave anymore. Of course, you should be proud to have a pet like me. A dignified, in your words, a semi-mechanical life form, is actually being treated as a pet. You have to know that I am. Blah, blah, blah. Huimao flaunted how special he was, how smart and how strong he was. Through this cat's incessant chatter, Celine knew that ever since the humans had built a stronghold on this planet, this cat had often wandered there. From there, it had learned the language of the Star Alliance, knew how to remember the year, could eavesdrop on the development plans of the humans on this planet, and could simulate the weapons of the humans. This cat was very proud of this. After all, it was self-taught, talented, intelligent, and had outstanding abilities. Silen shook his head and ignored this guy who was immersed in self-improvement. He took out the hoverboard from his bag, unfolded it, activated it, and left. Hey, wait for me. Huimao kicked its legs and quickly hooked the back of the hoverboard with its claws. It jumped up and then lay on the hoverboard with its eyes wide open, looking at the ground, getting farther and farther away. Its round eyes were shining with excitement. When the time comes, don't casually say that you're a semi-mechanical life form, lest you cause too much trouble. Yes, I know. Huimao knew in its heart that the degree of perversion of humans was unimaginable. It was really not easy to find a reliable person, so it had not let humans discover it for so many years. By the time Silen found Deus and the others, they were more or less done with their work. At that time, the communicator could not be used, and the white bears were all lying on the ground. Although Deus also felt uncomfortable, He knew that this was a rare opportunity, so it did not take much effort to deal with the white bears. Tang Xiuqiu was grabbing Ba Dao's uppermost arm and swinging it. Ba Dao freed 2 of his hands to deal with the animal hide, and the other 4 were for Tang Xiuqiu to play with. Seeing Silin coming over, Tang Xiuqiu exerted strength in her arm and swung it in the air, doing a light somersault in the air and landing on the ground. "Brother Silin, you're really something. We've already finished the mission before you came over." Silin laughed and fluttered Tang Xiuqiu's head, purposely messing up her short hair. Tang Xiuqiu did not get angry. She grabbed Silin's fluttering hand and giggled. "How many white bears did you catch?" Silin asked. "A total of 7, and I killed one of them." No wonder she was so happy. When those white bears stood up, they were more than 7 meters tall. It was already very good to be able to kill one, let alone a child like Tang Xiuqiu. Not bad, impressive. Not far away, Yudi, Xiaoshang, and the others looked at Silin in surprise. He had indeed changed his skin. They could not even recognize him. Even his physique had changed. He was more muscular and not as frail as before. Hui Mao was dissatisfied that he was ignored. He jumped down from the hoverboard and walked elegantly to the side to watch the people deal with the white bears. He had eaten countless of these white bears. It was no less than the number of white bears hunted by the hunters every time the planet opened up for hunting. He did not expect that their skin could be sold for money. Sigh, he had to be more careful in the future. He had to divide the parts that could be sold for money and eat the rest of the meat. "Hey, there's a cat. Brother Silin, where did you get this cat?" Tang Xiuqiu asked as she looked at Hui Mao, who was strolling leisurely in the field. "I picked it up." "Why did you pick up a cat?" "It's a kitten. With such a small size, it probably won't survive for long in the forest." "You went for a walk just to pick up this kitten?" Carrie said. Hearing Carrie's words, Hui Mao turned his head and looked at him with disdain. "Yo, that guy actually looked down on me." That was a look of disdain, right? Carrie shouted as if he had discovered another Miantuan chameleon. "It's true. Brother Silin, what's its name?" Tang Xiuqiu asked. "Hubeilu, or Holu for short." Hearing Silin's words, Hui Mao, who was watching with interest as Carrie and Dias skinned the white bear, was rather displeased. However, seeing that he was the creditor, Hui Mao did not argue with him. It's really cute." Tang Xiuqiu laughed. "What's cute about it?" "It's gray and ugly." Hearing Silin's words, Hui Mao exploded again. "You're the ugly one. You're ugly from head to toe." Carrie, who was skinning the bear, slipped and almost cut his hand. "Oh my God, this guy can actually talk." "Not bad. We can sell it for a good price." Not selling. Silin looked at Tang Xiuqiu. She was the one who said, "not selling," at the same time as him. "If we want to sell it, those white bears are enough. I'll keep it as a companion for the Miantuan." Tang Xiuqiu treasured Hui Mao quite a bit. Dias waved his hand. "All right, let's finish what we're doing first. The main ship is starting to rush us. After this batch of goods is done, we'll go do something big." "Something big?" Carrie's eyes lit up. "Boss, are we going to do a 5-year mission?" The 6th team had a rule. Every 5 years, they would do something big. It could take half a year, or even 4 to 5 years. If it was a short time, the team members would have a long vacation. If it was a long time, they would not have any vacation at all. The so-called 5-year mission was to report the results to the Vanguard A team. If there were no results, the team's status in Vanguard would drop. On the other hand, if the results were good, the team's status would rise.